Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto Was Not a Uzumaki and Build Harem with Kushina and Fem Kurama Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. Alone. The word is used in so many different ways it's impossible to compare how many times it's used by those that know the true logic of what the word defines. Only a select few know what the word truly means, and these chosen few have experienced things others would find unbearable or just plain suicidal. One boy on the streets of a war-torn town was walking by himself, was no parents to around him to keep him safe or a sibling he could look up to or he himself to protect. The boy was alone. The pure word defined this boy. He himself has been alone since the day he could walk. Strangely, everything came natural to him, so he taught himself how to walk and talk like any other kid his age. He still had troubles with writing or reading, but he was catching on after reading books and scrolls from the trash cans and practiced writing with old thrown-out scrolls. The boy was strangely tall for his age. For being only a 4-year-old, he was already the height of 4 feet 5. It caught many adults' eyes to see a child of his height. The next strange thing about the boy was his hair. It was long, spiky golden, while some of the bangs covered his eyes. His skin was a tan that showed he stayed outside mostly, and his arms showed some muscle for a kid his age. Usually a 4-year-old would never develop enough to gain any kind of muscle, but this boy was different and he knew it. He just didn't know how different he was from the rest. This child, only at the tender age of 4, was already able to fight, since he had to protect himself from people that would take things he needed to survive. It ranged from petty thugs, mercenaries to other low-life scum. So the boy was more than capable to defend himself if need be, which is pretty unnatural since the child should be playing with friends or staying with his parents, covered in their warmth of safety and reassurance. Not this child. Let us begin our little story with the boy, for he is our hero of our little tale. General POV. Walking on the dirt road was a man with the attire of a shinobi. He had dark red hair that was tied up in a small ponytail and had brown eyes. He wore a black shirt with a customized blue chest plate and spalders over his upper body. Engraved on the back of the chest plate was the insignia of a whirlpool and in kanji Uzu no Kuni. The man wore black pants that went all the way down to his calves, while finishing it up was black shinobi sandals, a kunai, shuriken pouch on his left hip, and a scroll on his right leg with the kanji for supplies. Finishing it up was the ninja strapped to his back. This man was Uzumaki Ryu, right-hand man of the Uzumaki clan, head himself and first commander of Uzu no Kuni's battalion. Sighing, he spoke, why on earth would Iro-sama send me all the way here to get rid of irritating Iwanin? It's bad enough it was just a scouting party getting in our borders, but now I'm low on supplies and need to restock. Scratching his head in annoyance while he kept muttering, Baka of a clan head, or stupid little brothers. When the man looked ahead, he saw something surprising. He saw a little kid by the age of 6, from what he could describe, walking toward him. He studied the kid with a more curious eye and saw the differences he had than kids he's seen before. The kid has some muscle on him. Now how on earth is that possible? Kids normally start getting muscles around the age of 8 or 10, not this kid's age, and the way he walks, it's like he's ready for an attack. This kid is interesting. With that, Ryu vanished, deciding to follow the kid. With the little boy, he had just passed the shinobi and was on immediate guard in case of an attack. Wouldn't be the first time he was attacked by a shinobi. Hey, what's a kid like you walking out here? It dangerous for little kids at night, especially with the war going on, said a voice ahead of him. Looking up slightly, he saw 3 thugs, each one holding a different weapon. One was holding a giant mace the size of the man himself. The second was a bald-headed man with a katana strapped to his right hip and a smug grin on his face. The last was holding a broadsword over his shoulders, so to intimidate anyone that seen it. Too bad he wasn't a normal person. He kept walking, ignoring them completely, which irked the 3 greatly. While in the shadows, Ryu rose an eyebrow in surprise. He would have jumped in to help him, but for some reason something was compelling him to watch first. Good thing to cause the kid was amazing him every second. Normally other kids hell adults would be scared at the three thugs' sight, but this one, he just didn't give them a second glance and kept walking. Oh yeah, this kid was interesting. Hey brat, it's disrespectful to ignore those talking to you, said the one with the giant mace, but the boy still ignored him. Hey brat, said the one with the katana, walked over to the boy and placed the unsheathed katana to his throat, trying to scare the gaki. You shouldn't annoy those bigger than you, will get you killed, he said, closing the blade closer to the boy's neck. The other two thugs grinned, waiting for the response from the kid while Ryu was about to jump in and help the kid out. But he got the shock of his life, as did the other two thugs, when the kid practically grabbed the offending blade and pushed it away before grabbing the thug by his neck and pulled him down till he was eye level with the boy. Don't you ever threaten me again, got that? He said in a more childlike tone than Ryu expected. Though the surprise wore off when the boy pulled the struggling thug down even more before actually throwing the full-grown man right over him and into the two unexpected thug, making them all fall in a heap. Turning around slightly, he raised his head so the three and Ryu could see his face more clearly. They could see his now eyes, which scared the living hell out of the trembling thugs, but made Ryu's interest in the boy grow even higher. The eyes were that of the purest azure blue anyone would ever see. It was like looking into the ocean itself, but what scared the thugs was the emotionless look in them, as well as the pure anger to the ones they were aimed at. Or I will kill you, he said, making the last proverbial straw be drawn, which in turn made the three thugs flee in fear. The look in the kid's eyes just screamed killer intent. When they were gone, the boy turned around in Ryu's direction, surprising the man a bit, and spoke, "Now what do you want, Shinobi-san?" he said, making Ryu in the trees smirk. I was right. This kid here is something unique. Coming out of the darkness of the forest, he showed himself to the blonde boy while speaking. Nothing really, just wanting to help you out if those three tried to attack you, but I can see you got that covered, he finished with a small smile. Confused at the man's action, he shrugged and was about to leave until he heard the man speak again. Hey kid, where's your parents at? He said, but already has a small suspicion. Looking over his shoulders slightly, he spoke in a somewhat somber tone. My name isn't kid, it's Naruto. Naruto D, and I don't have parents, never knew them. I've been alone since the day I could walk. The only thing I have from my parents is my middle initial, he finished, shocking Ryu greatly. This kid hasn't had a parental figure. Then did he teach himself how to talk and walk, for that matter? By Kami, this kid is something else. I wonder, he thought, ending with a small smirk appear on his face. I see, Naruto, then how would you like it if I can grant you a family? He said, making the newly named Naruto turn completely around with a slight widening of his eyes to show any indication he was surprised at the words. Family, you can grant me that? He asked. That was the one thing he truly wanted, and that was a family. Being alone for so long like he was tended for him to at least have something akin to a family. So to be offered something like this was a dream come true for him. But he was cautious. Wait, how do I know I can trust you? I've been tricked with this before, he said, narrowing his eyes at the man. Ryu just smiled warmly at the boy, while on the inside he would really like to find those that tricked this boy and maim them ever so slowly. Kneeling down till he was at the boy's eye level, he spoke, well, I can't really tell you to trust me, that's with your own instinct to do so. I am just here to give the chance orphans rarely ever get. So, what do you say? He asked to the strange yet very unique child. Looking into the man's eyes for any sign of deceit, Naruto ever so slowly lowered his caution before allowing a small smile appear on his face. I'd like that, he said, making Ryu snap his gaze to the child before grinning ear to ear. Good. Well then I think it's time we go home then, he said with a smile while little Naruto got up beside the man. Looking up curiously, he asked, where is home, anyway? He said, The word was very alien to him since he truly never had a home before, so to find out he was gonna have one was still strange to him. Looking down at boy, he smiled. Home, our country, it's called Uzu no Kuni, and of where my clan resides. It's also where you will be adopted into the family. Would you like that? He asked, which to boy just looked up to him with a small smile on his face. Why yeah, I'd like that very much, which Ryu just grinned even more as he ruffled the boy's hair, making Naruto blink in confusion at the action. Alright then, from now on your name is Uzumaki d. Naruto, which made a warm feeling come over the blonde. It confused him of what this feeling was, but he slowly welcomed it after repeating his new name a few times. Naruto, tell me, how were you able to do that to an adult twice your size? He asked. With that, Naruto and Ryu would ask each other questions as they made their way home. Uzumaki clan compound. Clan heads home. Taking a few short 2 days to arrive at Uzu no Kuni. Naruto was awed of how they had to traverse around the whirlpools to get onto the island. Even then, as he and the person over the last 2 days he saw as a father figure Ryu came upon land, it was so full of life. When they came upon a large village of some kind, he was baffled from all the people he saw. Some that were smiling or greeting one another. He also saw children playing happily with each other. It was like the people around here didn't care that a war was going on, but just looking at all these changes around him made him feel a strange urge to keep this peace alive. Though when they entered a certain building he saw a lot of people geared up like Ryu, but they greeted his san with smiles and strange curious looks on him, thought there wasn't a shred of malice in their eyes like he was used to. So to his surprise, when he and Ryu entered a small room that he read as clan head office, he was stunned to see a younger version of his father sitting at a desk reading a bunch of papers. In the man's lap was a small red-haired girl with a, to his amusement, tomato-shaped face and the most pretty violet eyes he ever saw. Their entrance got the attention of the two, so when they looked up, the Ryu look-alike smiled at them while the little red-haired girl looked at Naruto with a curious stare. Ah, Ryu-san, nice to see you back. I can see your trip was successful, and who's your little friend here? He said, looking at Naruto with a warm yet curious look in his eyes. The said blonde just looked into the man's eyes, unflinching, amazing Iroh inwardly while making Ryu smirk a little. How about we let the kids go play and I give you my report over a cup of tea? He said, gesturing to the little girl's curiousness of the older boy. While Naruto was looking back at the young girl with a confused stare. Iroh saw this and nodded with a smile. Sure, why not, Masumi, would you like to go play with the boy? He said, asking the little girl in his lap. Looking up, she blinked before waving her tiny little hands in a gesture. Why yeah, I wanna pee way, which Iroh just chuckled at before picking her up and setting her on the floor. Looking toward Ryu, he nodded, which the man nodded back before he looked at Naruto. Okay, Naruto, take her with you to the field outside, we'll be there in a little while. He said, which Naruto just slowly nodded before looking at the little girl and took her hand with his own. Alright, let's go then, he said, which the little girl took in stride and practically pulled him out the door frame and outside. All this looked quite comical since the girl was only 2 and the boy she was pulling was twice her size and only 2 years older than herself. After they left, though, the atmosphere in the room suddenly went tense. Iroh moved his eye to Ryu while the warmth in them was still there, but now a cold, serious look in them that spoke of a leader. Alright Ryu, report your findings, which the man just gave a hi. Yes, it would seem the assumptions are correct. Iwa is getting more bold with their offenses. When I reached the area I was designated to be in, there was a scouting Iwa squadron within our borders. I took care of them, but it's just how they're doing it now. It would seem they're getting bolder every day. Kumoto is, from what information I could extract from them, that the Sandaime Raikage and Nadaime Tsuchikage will be talking about trade agreements, but it's still something to worry about, he said, finishing his report. Nodding, I see things are as I feared then, With the sudden increase with Iwa's forces and their friendly relationship with Kumo, things could get very bad in the future, he said, which Ryu frowned, but nodded in agreement with his leader. That's true, and with the war still going on, things will only get worse from now on, he said. That is true, but now let's talk, Ni-san. Iroh said with a smile on his face. Ryu's stance quickly reverted to an aloof look while a big grin came up on his face. Hee okay. Well, I know you have questions, so go ahead and ask since I have my own. Which Iroh complied. Well, I'd like to ask, who is that boy you're brought along? I can already tell he's different from the stance he was in and the look in his eyes. So care to tell me who he is? But the look he got from his brother was something that shocked him a bit. Ryu's eyes quickly turned into a fatherly warmth when Naruto was mentioned. Ah, that boy. Well, his name is Naruto D, and I found him walking the streets of one of those war-torn villages, he said, but was cut off when Iroh rose an eyebrow at the kid's name. Naruto D. What's the initial for? But only got a shrug from the man. I don't know, the kid only said it was the only thing he was left by from his parents. Though get this, that boy, he's really something, Iroh, he said, which the man just rose an eyebrow. How, he's only what, 6, 7 years old, right? Nothing special about that, right? But only got a negative shake of the head from Ryu. Linking his hands together, Ryu spoke. No, Iroh, this boy is very unique. Let me tell you what I mean. With that, Ryu told Iroh about his first time seeing Naruto and his amazing capabilities. Outside the compound forests of Uzu no Kuni. It had already been a few minutes since Naruto was dragged by the little girl. Since then he was sitting on the grass watching the little long red-haired girl play around on the slide or sandbox. Though looking at the little girl he felt a small smile come up on his face. The little girl was so full of energy it was surprising. Oi oi, said a excited voice. Looking up he saw the big violet eyes looking back at him. Startled at the sudden closeness he fell backwards, making the little red head giggle. Blinking, Naruto looked up at the bright blue sky until he saw the little girl crawl up to him with a curious look in her eyes. Hey Anyo, what's your name? She asked, which Naruto just blinked before setting up right before turning his gaze to her. Me. Well, my name is Naruto, what about you? He asked, smiling innocently. I'm Kushina Uzumaki. And she said before counting on her fingers before showing them to his eyes. And I'm 2 years old, she said, messing up her saying like a toddler would. Nodding, Naruto gestured at the playground. Why aren't you playing? Which Kushina looked down at the ground embarrassed, but he did catch her mumbled words. 'Cause I can't swing by Ms. Welf. Nodding a bit he stood up and grasped her tiny little hand in his own. Then I guess I'll help you then, huh? He said a bit more cheerily around Kushina. The girl's eyes got wide before she started jumping up and down excited. Yay! Exclaiming the hyper redhead before she tried to get on the swing. Only for her to be too small to get up there alone. Looking at Naruto, he saw the tears welling up on the sides of her eyes. I'm to SM wall, trying to jump into the seat. Naruto saw this and chuckled slightly before doing something he's never done before. He walked over to Kushina, kneeled eye level with her and picked her up gently, surprising the little girl and setting her into the swing. Kushina blinked before looking at the smiling Naruto. Thank you, she said. Hearing her say this he just gave her a nod. Now want me to push you? He asked. Kushina abruptly looked at him and grinned. Yes, I wanna go high. Which he just obliged, so with that he lightly pushed the little girl on the swing while thoughts ran through his mind doing so. Why is it that I'm so much more relaxed around this little one? I've smiled, laughed more than I was with San, or even more than I can remember actually. Though when he looked upon the little girl that looked to be having the time of her life as he pushed her on the swing, he smiled faintly. What the two didn't know was that Ryu and Iroh were looking at the scene with smiles on their faces. When Iroh was told of Naruto's amazing capabilities from Ryu, he admitted to be interested in the boy as well, Hell, he was shocked greatly when he said the boy was actually 4 years old and just really tall for his age. So when Ryu told him that he adopted Naruto into the clan, he was greatly curious of how good a shinobi the boy could be. But now seeing him play with his daughter brought a smile to his face. Kushina's Ka-san died in childbirth while he had to perform a secret Uzumaki fuinjutsu on his newborn daughter. Since the day of her birth, the Kyuubi no Kitsune had attacked Uzu no Kuni for some unknown reason. Now though the little girl that was alone without anyone to play with now had someone here. A boy, that his older brother had taken in as his own, a boy he knew would be something special. Shaking his head, he gestured at Ryu before walking up to the laughing pair of children. During his musings, he could see that now Kushina was off the swing and now on Naruto's shoulders with her head laid on his head like a pillow. The young Naruto was actually smiling brightly at them as he held Kushina on his shoulders. Walking up to the two, Ryu spoke, "Naruto, I've spoken with Iroh-sama here and he has decided to let you become full-fledged Uzumaki. He just wants to ask you one question is all he asks," he said, but was actually hoping Naruto agrees. Looking at Iroh, he spoke, "I don't care anything, to have a family is good enough for me," he said, which both brothers smiled genuinely at. The boy unknowingly was already part of the clan and family. Kneeling down, Iroh asked, "Well Naruto, I want to ask you a personal question. Do you wish to become strong?" he said with a serious glint in his eyes, but Naruto met his gaze unflinchingly, living a life as he had made him grow up quite quick, so meeting a man's gaze like this was nothing to him. "Without a doubt in my mind, I'd do anything to get stronger," he said. "Alright, and what would you do with this power and strength when you had it?" This was the most important question. But the answer he got made his eyes go wide while Ryu chuckled, somehow expecting the answer. Glancing at Kushina's sleeping form, he turned his gaze back at Iroh with a determined look in them. "To protect those important to me, I will become strong, stronger than anyone, stronger than the gods themselves if I must, if it is to protect those I care about." This made Iroh close his eyes to hide his shock. The answer he got was so unbelievable, and to think he got it from a 4-year-old. Chuckling a bit, he opened his eyes once more and said, "Very well then, from today onwards, Uzumaki D. Naruto, you are to begin your training as a shinobi of Uzu no Kuni and a proud protector of the Uzumaki clan." Ryu rolled his eyes. Iroh was always the bit over-dramatic even when they were kids. "Hi, I will become strong and make the Uzumaki clan proud, come high hell or the wrath of every Biju. I will become the strongest being alive so I can protect those important to me," he stated. Clasping his hands together, Iroh spoke with a grin, "Very good then, well then I do believe it's time we all got some sleep, we can discuss your training tomorrow," which got nods from Ryu and Naruto. So with that, Iroh went to take Kushina from Naruto's shoulders, which was a bit hard since she was a bit clingy to Naruto form. So as Naruto watched Iroh take his sleeping daughter to her bedroom, he took another glance at the little girl and smiled once more. "Yeah, to protect those important to me, that is my oath, to protect what I cherish the most till my dying breath." Unknown to anyone, a certain fox had seen the whole interaction with her container and the boy and was greatly curious about the hidden power within the boy. The being chuckled. "Things are getting interesting, hee hee hee." 5 years later. 5 years. It's been 5 years since Naruto was adopted into the Uzumaki clan and his first meeting with Kushina. 5 years since he began his training with his father, Ryu. And finally 5 years since his friendship with Kushina grew leaps and bounds. After his first time meeting with the hyper little redhead, she would stay as close to him as possible. Like as close as him carrying her piggyback or on his shoulders, but he truly didn't mind, in fact especially when he found out her was her favorite thing to do. Kushina, to him was in so many words, but the most simple one was his best friend. No, she was more. To him Kushina was most definitely an important person he'd risk death for. Though embarrassing situations always followed between him and Kushina, which Ryu and Iroh would use to blackmail him later on. Kushina though had him promise something very important to not only her, but himself as well. The girl over the last 5 years was brought into shinobi training herself since she watched Naruto train in becoming one and a very strong one at that. Since his training began, both Ryu and Iroh were struck speechless at how fast Naruto learned, be it physically or mentally. The boy was a machine, he never stopped. Hell, it took a few clan members to pull the growing boy out of the library to go to bed. Though, he did shock not just Ryu, but Iroh and most of the clan when he showed his ability to excel in all manner of being a shinobi. Whether it be ninjutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu, kenjutsu, and most importantly to the clan as a whole his ability in fuinjutsu. He wasn't a Uzumaki by blood, but by Kami herself the boy was a genius even with them. He could create seals on the second or experiment to make new ones. Though personally Naruto's most concentrated art to himself was his taijutsu, kenjutsu and fuinjutsu. Seeing this his father Ryu had Naruto decide on what kind of weapon he wanted. Naruto chose to use a katana like his father. So with the commission, Ryu had the clan's blacksmith Hoseki Uzumaki create a blade for Naruto. The blade was designed for Naruto's tall stature of 5 feet 6 with him only being 9 years old. It was just a normally made katana with only a difference was the Uzumaki insignia upon the pommel and the inscribed words upon the finely crafted blade. Protect those you cherish. If you lose, get stronger and defeat the one who beat you. Go past your limits and beyond to achieve your goals. Dare I say, break Kami's limit and become something more. For some reason handling a katana to Naruto was almost second nature. His skills with the blade upon his training was second to none. No one, not even Ryu, could beat him in an all-out kenjutsu duel, and if he did it was due to how much more Ryu had in height than Naruto, but that was almost covered. His muscles with kenjutsu and taijutsu training were for some strange reason which also baffled the Uzumaki medics develop faster than anyone has ever seen. In which case, Naruto was strong, very strong, stronger than anyone in the clan was by far, but then again the Uzumaki clan was more generalized in fuinjutsu than taijutsu. Even now, the boy continued to surprise them all every passing day as he trained. His drive to grow stronger and will to never give in was unsurpassed even by the clan head himself. So when he finally passed and given the title as a shinobi during his second year of training, they saw how much of a genius Naruto truly was. So, with how much he improved, Iroh would give him more to study upon and train in both physically and mentally. And after only 2 years of training, in the last 6 years he was already being dispatched to do missions with several squads of Uzumaki shinobi. So on the 5th year of Naruto's life in Uzu no Kuni, war finally came to their borders and all shinobi were dispatched to stop it from coming too close to their home. So with Naruto's already amazing skills he was sent out along with his father. Despite how much his best friend Kushina worried about it when he did go out fighting, it was all the more relief for the long-haired redhead when the troops of the Uzumaki clan came back with big grins on their faces with Naruto between them all with a small smirk of his own. Even being 9 as he was, Naruto's actions in the war between Uzu no Kuni and those that brought the war to their border showed him being the frontal assault on most of every attack that they send or major defense with the abilities to push them back. I was Tsuchikage at the time. Onoki was still pissed at how only a child was able to hold off his shinobi from any kind of advancing. Even Kumo suffered casualties when Naruto came upon the battlefield. They were losing many on their side by only a child at the age of 9. Naruto's fame spread across the other countries of his feats in the war. How he was only a child, but the skills of a Kage are higher. This got attention of many villages and countries. Even daimyos saw this strange yet powerful boy. So with this, the Uzumaki clan was getting even more known since they produced such a shinobi, but this also got the unwanted attention of Iwa and Kumo's anger as well. It also got the attention of the Uzumaki clan's allies, Konoha, whom hasn't helped a damn bit since the war broke out near the Uzumaki border, but the current Hokage wanted to meet the boy to see if the rumors were true. only for Naruto himself to outright deny his invitation to the surprise of his clan. Though during the war Iwa and Kumo saw fit the only way to take down Naruto was to take him down emotionally. And by that Iwa and Kumo made the biggest mistake of their lives. It was when Ryu's command post was ambushed by a combined effort of both Iwa and Kumo did they attack the unprepared Uzumaki. There was many casualties on both sides. Iwa and Kumo lost countless shinobi trying to kill Ryu, but they succeeded in doing so. In which they hoped would emotionally tear the monster child, as they called Naruto, apart, making him unfit to fight in the war. Oh, how wrong they were. When news reached back to the Uzumaki clan, they were all pretty worried when Naruto found out. I mean, Uzumaki Ryu was one of the most well-respected Uzumaki in all of history. And one damn good of a shinobi, so when they heard he was ambushed by Iwa and Kumo and their two armies, things went straight to hell. Flashback. Naruto just sat there in front of Iroh, who had a saddened look upon his face. He had just heard the news of his older brother dying in the war. He truly felt the man shouldn't have died like he did, but he took a lot of them with him. But right now, he just told the very son of the man, his father was killed by his hated enemies. He honestly didn't know what was gonna happen, but was worried Naruto might do something crazy and idiotic. He was right. Abruptly standing up, Naruto lowered his gaze to the floor and spoke, "Thank you for leaving me with this news, Iroh-sama, but I must go," he said, turning around so Iroh wouldn't see his shadowed eyes. The clan head had a feeling a dread come upon him and spoke before Naruto could leave. "Wait, Naruto, please don't do what I think you're gonna do. Don't do it," he pleaded with the boy, no man that had fought in the war and was undoubtedly stronger than him in certain aspects. Turning his head slightly, Naruto spoke in the most chilling tone Iroh has ever felt before. "No, Iroh-sama, I will not let this go. Tu-san was the one who brought me out of that accursed life. Gave me a new life and family, and those bastards killed him. I will not let this go unpunished." The words he spoke made Iroh freeze in place. It sounded like death itself was talking to him, shaking him out of his stupor. "But Naruto, what you're doing is suicide. Your father wouldn't want this for you. Please don't do it. Think about what you have here. If you go out there and fight, you won't be coming back alive. Think about Kushina. She would be torn up if you died, and you damn well know it," he said, trying to plead his adopted nephew out of doing what he was gonna do. Naruto stood there at the door frame for a good few seconds before turning around completely and revealing his eyes upon Iroh, who saw the look in them nearly had a heart attack. They held such anger and intensity he was close to the brink of passing out. The blue in them were as cold as the coldest glacier and were sharp enough to cut through solid steel. Naruto's face was contorted into a face that showed his immense anger, but also pure uncontrolled hate. "No. I won't die. Not right now, Iroh-sama. I'm not doing this for not just out to avenge Tu-san, but to end this petty war. We are losing many lives to this and I won't allow it anymore. Besides, Kushina-chan should know better than anyone I can't die easy. But I will be back, Iroh-sama, and this time whether I come back hated by the clan or not for my actions I don't care, at least I helped my clan. But I will go give Kushina a visit before I go," he said. Not seeing any way to stop the teen, he lowered his head in defeat. "Very well, Naruto, but please don't die out there. The clan needs you. Kushina needs you," he said, which Naruto just nodded before he disappeared in a shushin. Appearing in front of Kushina's room, he quietly opened the door to see the sleeping redhead with piles upon piles of Fuinjutsu scrolls around her on the bed. Smiling amusingly, he gently put the scrolls away before lifting up Kushina's sleeping form and put her in bed before covering her up. Upon doing this, he kissed her forehead with a few goodnight words to her. "Good night, Kushina-chan, hope you don't get mad at me for my actions." With that, Naruto strapped his katana, the one his father had made for him, across his back and covered up his face with a black mask. With that, he jumped to the window and jumped into the forest, heading for the fight of his life. Kyuubi within Kushina's seal saw the little interaction and frowned. The boy she watched for the last 6 years kept amazing the Biju every day. The way the boy grew stronger, his abnormal way of learning and abilities no other human has she seen had before. Kushina, the girl she was starting to talk to early on, would probably be worried sick for the boy. Hell, even she, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, was worried for the kid. Correction man, no boy faces what he does every day. Flashback over. Needless to say, what Naruto did would be told for years and years to come. Storming into the combined base of both Iwa and Kumo, which in itself was the size of a hidden village. The angry Uzumaki raised all sorts of hell in the place, planting explosive tags all around the weapon storages to food and water supply. He also practically used his arsenal in ninjutsu to destroy many unexpected shinobi, in which awoke a hornet's nest. Upon the next scene that followed could only be said to have been insane and completely shocking. A 9-year-old by himself was fighting and actually destroying waves and waves of shinobi left and right. The wrathful Uzumaki was like a vengeful god. His anger couldn't be sated until all those that were in on the attack of his father felt his full wrath. This battle had gotten the attention of both the Sandame Reikage and Sandame Tsuchikage, and both were shocked at seeing the one person that had been the biggest thorn in their side in the war. And seeing most of their shinobi all lay dead at their feet made their anger for the unnaturally strong child go up even higher. The battle that happened next could only be described as destructive. One lone child fought 2 cages and leftover shinobi. Naruto had to use everything he had to fight them at a standstill, while the other shinobi were pretty much just caught in the crossfire. Though the odds were stacked very high against Naruto, he did the impossible. He was beating both of the cages back. That is when the old Tsuchikage pulled out the last trick up his sleeve, hoping it would catch the devil child's guard off for them both to kill him. Too bad he didn't know how bad he just messed up. Flashback. Panting, Naruto held his katana out in front of him against the 2 exhausted cage in front of him. The area around them was full of craters, upheavals of rock from Onoki's Doden jutsus, and a massive thunderstorm from the Reikage's nature-powered Raiden jutsus. Bodies of both cages' shinobi littered the ground around them. All killed by one child. A kami-forsaken child. Naruto's form wasn't any better. He was bleeding everywhere. His katana was closing to shattering, but thanks to enhancing it with futon chakra it was able to sustain attacks, but even that was cutting it close. Over his face was just blood going down his head. All his other weapons were gone due to fighting a massive army. He had wounds coming from every part of his body, big slash wounds across his chest, a scorch mark upon his back which would have left a scar if not for his protective chest plate. His left arm was useless due to it being broken in several places by a Doden jutsu, which left him holding his weapon with his right hand. Blood poured from all around him out of his wounds and from the blood of his enemies around the battlefield. Panting, the Sandame Reikage, a very tall muscular dark-skinned man, was kneeling on one knee as the other used for support. The man was covered in injuries as well, from a broken jaw and quite a few teeth knocked out from what looked like a well-placed punch. The man's right arm was totally singed from down on up. His left eye was closed due to having too much blood pouring down his face. Panting, damn, now I see why this kid was such a pain during our offenses. His father was just as bad, but this kid, he's something else, he said while his respect for the kid despite his anger toward him rose a few notches. Onoki just snorted. He too was completely bloody from head to toe. His armor long forgotten in the battle when it proved useless to the boy's shocking strength. Onoki was a man the size of a headpiece and a half. He wore at the moment Tsuchikage battle armor, but right now it was cracking or falling apart. His nose was broken in ways that medical jutsu wouldn't ever be able to fix. His chest was practically cut to ribbons from the boy, futon attacks and slashes from his katana-enhanced swings. Meh, I agree, which is why I have this final trick up my sleeve, he said, getting his partner's attention. Onoki started digging in his armor until he pulled out a small scroll. Naruto tensed ready for a possible attack, but he was already reaching his limit just by standing where he was. He doubted he could get back to Uzu no Kuni like he was now. Though when the Raikage saw what the scroll really was, he had a nervous look in his eyes. I don't think that's such a good idea here. This kid might actually snap if you unseal that, he said, a bit worried. Onoki just snorted, already smearing his blood on the scroll. I don't care. Whatever it takes to kill this bastard, the better. So kid, I hope you're ready to see this. He said. So when the scroll popped into smoke, it revealed something that made Naruto's bod go into shock. It was the body of his father Uzumaki Ryu, skin pale as white, lips pale, blue eyes void of life. Raikage saw the sudden change in behavior of the kid and suddenly felt something off. He was right. Why you bastards? Naruto screamed in rage. The two never saw it coming. Flashback over. What would have been told by those two cages that survived the incident was something that was just plain impossible. When Onoki showed the kid his father's corpse, he practically snapped big time. He started to release so much killer intent on them it froze them in place. They never commented on it, but to them it was the scariest thing in their lives. They saw the very ground around them start to crack and break. The boy lost all consciousness with his body and somehow moved instinctively. What he did shattered all borderline of the word impossible in their minds. The kid grabbed the air itself somehow and started to grip it before they heard something like he was ripping paper, but the kid brought both his hands down with the sound of earth tearing itself apart. The battlefield around them started to shift uncontrollably and break apart, causing fissures, upheavals the size of a mountain, and the land itself actually flipping in over itself. It was like Mother Nature was pissed, and brought down the mother of all earthquakes. It shook the very foundation of the elemental counties, but the boy wasn't done. He moved along, taking his father's body, but also punching the air itself as a strange bubble was around his fist at the time. When he did this, multiple shockwaves blasted from where he punched and into both cages, sending them flying into one of the upheavals at the time, in which knocked them both out from flying at such high speeds. That day, that battle was only seen by a few, but described it as Kami smiting the very earth she created, the power of which was indescribable. It was scary. The Uzumaki clan on that very same night all heard about Naruto leaving to avenge his father, but some were not believing he would come back despite his amazing abilities. Kushina herself, the poor little 7-year-old, was devastated when she heard how this all happened, the death of Ryu, Naruto's departure to strike back. She wanted to see him desperately, to know he was safe, but Kyuubi within her was telling her things were fine. Though when they felt the tremors coming from where the Iwa and Kumo's main force base camp was, they were a little nervous. So imagine all their shock when an unconscious Naruto walks through the gates, blood all over, carrying the dead body of his father on his shoulder. The dull look in his eyes scared many, since it showed he wasn't in control of his body at the time. Only when he laid the body of his father at the feet of a shocked Iroh did Naruto's bloody form hit face first into the ground as his katana snapped in half upon hitting the ground with him. Seeing the state Naruto was in, he sent for the best medics to start healing on him. He had to also hold back Kushina as she was desperately trying to see her best friend, only to see his injured and bloody form be carried on a stretcher as he was surrounded by medics trying to desperately heal him. That very morning, both Iroh and Kushina were at Naruto's bedside as he healed. Kushina was laying beside his form, trying to do anything to heal him in any way possible. Iroh, the man was jumbled with so many thoughts. Reports are already coming from the battlefield, corpses everywhere, and from what the report said, it looked like the Kyuubi came though there. Looking at Naruto's form, he let out a small grimace. To have let loose like you did, Naruto, what horror must you have seen to done something like that? I mean, making upheavals, flipping the land itself, causing earthquakes. Naruto, just what exactly are you? He was amazed at this. Ryu always said Naruto was unique, but this was completely incredible. The boy was only 9 years old, but did something in one night no one in history has been able to do. Fight an army alone, fight and beat 2 cages single-handedly. It was an impossible feat all on its own, but Naruto did it. He was quite certain now, people would know his name now, there was no denying it now. Naruto's reputation was going to skyrocket because of this. Hell, he wouldn't be surprised if other villages put this in their history books or something. Looking up at his daughter, he saw her sleeping peacefully beside Naruto with a small smile on her face. Looking upon the scene, he found it amusing since he and Ryu always thought of two together quite adorable. Getting up gently, he left the room so the two could be the only there in each other's presence. He could talk to Naruto later. 1 o'clock a.m. Naruto's recovery room. Groggily opening his eyes, Naruto suddenly felt a jolt of massive pain all over his body. He grit his teeth enduring the jolt of sudden pain. Upon his lessening, he opened his eyes once more to see it was night out. That's when sudden rush of memories hit him. The battle. What happened? All I remember was fighting the Tsuchikage and Raikage before that old midget Onoki pulled out some scroll, then everything else went white. Looking around the room, he saw medical supplies on his left along with a few get well letters from fellow clan members. This brought a smile upon his face. Looking on his right, his eyes widened to see his best friend Kushina sleeping beside him, holding onto his bandaged right arm tightly. The little girl's face had tears going down her face and her eyes were clenched tightly to show she was having a nightmare. The quivering of her bottom lip was the key, knowing she was in some sort of distress. Quickly as he could, Naruto scooted himself closer to her quivering body. That's when he heard her whispering words from the nightmare she was having. Don't die. Naruto-kun. Don't die on me. Please, don't die. His eyes soften. The little girl must be dreaming of his injured form. Sliding into bed once more, he wrapped his left arm around Kushina and brought her into his chest while ignoring grimace of pain doing so, but he continued ignoring his jolting slight pains and hugged the trembling girl to himself to try and quell her fears and rid the nightmare that was haunting her. It seemed to work when she started to quiver less and snuggled closer into him, embracing his warmth he gave off. Seeing this, he hugged even tighter as he started feeling the effects of sleep taking over him once again, so allowing to take him into the world of sleep. He drifted off with his on top of Kushina own with his arms around her protectively. This would be the sight his medics would come to see to check up on him that same morning. 7:27 a.m. Naruto's recovery room. Ah, they look so cute together, squealed a nurse as two more of them nodded as well, looking at the scene before them. Kushina's form was mingled with Naruto's own, her face an inch from his own as her little arms together around his body. While Naruto wasn't that much different, his position didn't change much from early on, but his face was in the same position as Kushina's with his arms around her small body compared to his own. But what was the real cute thing to the nurses was the way Naruto, the pride of the Uzumaki clan and now legend among the elemental nations, looked so much like the child he looked to be. He wasn't the powerful entity upon the battlefield that struck fear into the hearts of his enemies. He was just a normal boy. Albeit, he was by far not normal that much was known, but he was still a child that really didn't have a childhood and really acted like one around Kushina. It was thought by many people that Naruto was bipolar with how he acted, a little like a child around Kushina, but then a veteran soldier on briefing of missions or on the battlefield. Either way, this scene to the nurses was quite a sight to see. "We're done here, let's go before we wake them up," said one nurse with the other two nodding in agreement. Very well. With that, they checked his status before leaving the room, closing the door with a gentle click. A few minutes later, Kushina's eyes started to twitch before slightly opening them only to close them back from the bright light of the morning. "I curse you, son, I shall find a way to relinquish your burning rays. Or my name is Uzumaki Kushina Databane." Kyuubi chuckled at her container's words. It was so funny sometimes how much Kushina hated the sun in the mornings. "Wakey wakey, Kushina-chan. Huh, Q-chan, when did you wake up?" "Meh, around a few minutes ago, but you certainly found yourself in a good predicament if I do say so myself." Mentally scrunching her face up in confusion, which to Kyuubi made her look like a kid to her amusement. What do you mean? Well, what do you remember before you fell asleep? Well, all I can remember is being with Tu-san in Naruto-kun's room when he was recovering. Finding the upcoming question amusing, she asked. And do you remember anything else before you fell asleep? No. He. Then wake up and you'll see what I'm talking about. Also tell Naruto-kun I said hi, and before Kushina could reply, Kyuubi mentally pushed her out of her mindscape with a small laugh. That's when Kyuubi's face got serious. She did give Kushina a small lie there. She was awake through everything. When Naruto left and returned, she had seen his body upon return. It was a good thing Kushina wasn't able to see the full extent of his injuries, or she would be having nightmares for a while. Though, she did hear of Naruto's achievement. To say she, the Kyuubi no Kitsune strongest of all Biju, was surprised was an understatement. She was completely shocked at seeing someone like Naruto's age doing what he did. Sure, she's seen his abilities before during spars with Iroh and other clan members, but she heard of what he did at the base. Decimating it completely, leaving no survivors with only the Tsuchikage and Raikage barely alive. Now, she found it shocking when she felt the tremors from where the battle took place. She and everyone else in Uzu no Kuni felt the quakes and tremors coming from the battle, and to learn that someone outside the battle scene, it was Naruto, to have caused such shockwaves, and from the earth itself was saying there was much more to Naruto than she or anyone else knew. The puzzle that was Uzumaki d. Naruto, that was almost solved by her, just got much more confusing and challenging. In history, no human was recorded in the elemental nations to have the control and manipulation to control the very earth itself, yet Naruto did it himself and on godly levels as well, from what this spectator reported. Now, usually she wasn't so interested in humans, but Naruto was by human standards, not human, for his terrifying powers and the strength he wields. Now to her, Naruto was most definitely strong enough to probably face the Aikibi or Nibi, but not any higher. But an assumption like that was most legendary in itself. She honestly couldn't wait for the coming future of how much stronger Naruto might become and the relationship between himself and her container. Back in the real world, Kushina's eyes suddenly snapped open to see nothing but the sleeping face of Naruto in front of her. Holding back a yelp of surprise, Kushina looked down, see her small body engulfed in the arms of Naruto with his own covering her in a soothing yet protective manner. She blushed though, when she felt her arms wrapped his back, or at least mostly around his back, since he was still much taller than her. Kyuubi within our mindscape giggled at her container's position. Eep! Muttered a maroon-faced Kushina. This seemed to wake Naruto up, for he started to stir a bit, but this got the action of him opening his eyes. Naruto suddenly heard the sound of what was like a mouse. So opening his eyes, he was staring into the violet eyes of the 7-year-old Kushina. He laid there staring into the surprised eyes of his best friend until they heard the door open. Upon entering, Iroh found the surprising yet funny sight of his daughter in the same bed as her best friend, hugging each other. Chuckling, he spoke. Hey, I see you're awake, Naruto, and are in good care. If what I see before me is anything to go by, but I must ask to wait for that kind of action. I'm too young to be a grandfather right now, he said before bursting in laughter when Naruto's eyes grew to comical proportions as a full-body blush came forth. Kushina wasn't much better. Despite being only 7, she knew of what her father was speaking of and wasn't any better. Her face matched her hair, with it being the color of a deep maroon. Her violet eyes were getting wide as they possibly could be, but the sudden actions of a certain vixen made it much worse for the little redhead. Ooh, I sense a very good future for you, Kushina-chan. This only made her blush deepen worse, but she did look at her Tu-san, who was smirking up a storm with a terrifying eye. Tou-san, she yelled, before jumping out of bed and pounding at Iroh with her little fists. Iroh just put up his arms defensively as his energized daughter kept pounding away at him. Naruto watched this a little surprised yet amused at her reaction. A few minutes later, A panting Kushina was sitting on the bed with a pout, with Naruto sitting upright with his injuries all but healed. Yet another fascinating ability of his to heal at such incredible speeds, but he was still getting worried glances from Kushina with his bloody form flashing in her mind. Iroh suddenly spoke. Naruto, I have been informed you're ready to be discharged from here, but I do have questions for you, he said, which Naruto nodded. Hi, I know Iroh-sama, but Kushina-chan, would you mind stepping outside? He asked, but got a defiant stare from the girl. No way. I wanna hear what you did, and besides, if I am to become a shinobi, then I must hear the words of someone I see as a great shinobi, hear the experiences when they're on the battlefield. So please, don't hesitate, Naruto-kun, she said, while both Iroh and Naruto were looking at her with wide eyes and gaping mouths. Kushina-chan. Masumi. Seeing the looks she was getting, she blushed, looking away from them. What? I can speak freely and however I want to, she said, puffing out her cheeks. This seemed to get a small smile from Iroh and a chuckle from Naruto. Placing a hand on her hand, Naruto ruffled her hair, making her pout even more. Ahahaha, I see, but you're still a squirt, Kushina-chan, so none of that tough talk, okay? He said jokingly, which Kushina stuck her tongue out at him, which only amused them both even further. Hey, I'm only 2 years younger than you. Even if you're taller than me, she pointed out indignantly. Naruto just chuckled even more while messing up her hair even more, thus earning a small growl from her, which soon turned into her trying to pull his hand away from her. Iroh, seeing the childish scene, suddenly remembered what he needed to ask Naruto about. Well, enough games, Naruto, I need you to explain everything to me right when you arrived at the base, and if you can, when you left, trying to not say, and when you carried your dead father's body all the way back to Uzu no Kuni. Flinching, which Iroh caught, Naruto stopped his torture with Kushina, which the little girl looked worryingly at him. Yes, it is best you know, right after I left Uzu no Kuni. Thus, Naruto explained everything to Iroh, his arrival at the base, his laid-out plan of destroying their supplies, and hesitating a bit on his part of his silent killings of many shinobi. He also told him of when he unleashed his arsenal of ninjutsu. The rest shinobi that weren't exterminated by the attack jumped at him. Naruto spoke of his fighting with the army, using his control of Futon, Suiten, and Raiden to its fullest potential, releasing all of his abilities in Kenjutsu to their fullest capabilities. Then he told them of his fight with Onoki and that Raikage with the last of the shinobi joining them. Iroh was amazed of how the boy held his own against the two cages after facing an army that size, while Kushina had a starry look in her eyes. Naruto told them of when he had to release all of his personally created chakra and weight seals upon his body and katana to make himself at least a little above both Onoki and the Raikage. Afterwards he explained the fight, Onoki using his Jinten release, dust release, while the Raikage used his Raiden Jutsu that was powered by the natural lightning itself. Then how did you fight them both when they used those kind of elements, Naruto-kun? Kushina asked cutely with curiosity. Naruto smiled. Well, let's just say I have my own way of facing elements like that and leave it at that. Now onto what else I remember. All I remember next is that all three of us were at our ends, and I was close to collapsing, until Onoki did something, he said with a thoughtful look come up on his face. Try and remember, Naruto, please, I need to know, it's very important. Iroh said, hiding his astonishment of the man in front of him. Naruto was only 9 years old, too young to be on the battlefield or be a shinobi for that matter. But the boy was very adamant to become one. It was still so incredible to see someone as young as him rise to power in such speed as he has. Hell, I'd say he could be the true Kami no Shinobi in the next few years with the rate he's going. Unlike that old fool Hiruzen. Straining his mind for what happened next, he found the clips of small memories hitting him, Onoki pulling out a scroll, the Raikage warning the old cage, the sound of a scroll releasing. That's when the body of his dead Two-san flashed in his mind. Snapping open his eyes, Naruto screamed. Onoki. You old fucking dwarf. You better pray to Kami I don't find you, for not even Kami will stop me from murdering you. Shocking the two Uzumakis in the room or Kushina's case scaring her. Iroh jumped out of his seat and held the struggling Naruto down. Naruto. Naruto, calm down. The fight is over, you won. But the words didn't cease the screaming blonde that was now in an enraged state. The killing intent coming from the blonde startled many in the hospital while some shinobi were speeding toward the building to find the source. Iroh was having much trouble holding down the furious boy. Kushina was watching with tearful eyes, wondering what made her best friend go into such a state. War can do many things, Kushina-chan, and there is many things Naruto hides from you. Like his side of a deadly warrior or his anger and hate to those he despises the most. What you're seeing now is Naruto's mental blockade he has probably held back all these years completely destroy itself. Whatever happened in that battle must have made Naruto-kun snap. Is there any way to stop this? I want Naruto-kun back. This one scares me. Kushina-chan, you might have to get used to this side of Naruto. There will be times when he's like that in the future and he will need your help to quell down his anger, or he might just lose himself in the state of bloodlust and hate. But a way to turn him away from this kind of state is only one way, and that's from having someone very important to him try and pull him back to reality before he loses himself. After hearing what Kyuubi said, Kushina looked at the struggling form of her best friend and her two-san who was trying to calm him down only to end up failing and making it worse. She decided what to do. I will help Naruto-kun in any way I can. As long as he comes back to normal. I'll do anything. Good kid. But hurry, he's getting worse. Snapping out her stupor, Kushina stood up and ran to the bed before jumping onto Naruto's form. Pushing away her two-san, she placed her hands upon his shoulders and got into his face. Naruto-kun, wake up. This isn't you. You're not like this. But it was to no avail. The blonde was almost at his limit before breaking loose and letting his lust for Onoki's death overcome him. Kushina, get off him. He's not in control of his body at the moment. Iroh shouted, trying to handle the situation, but his Masumi just made it worse. Though he couldn't help but know she was probably more worried than he was with how Naruto was acting. He didn't get an answer from her since she was too concentrated to find a way to calm Naruto down. That's when something flashed into her mind. She had seen other people do that one thing to someone they cared about, and it was between a man and a woman. Though she did gain an atomic blush of she thought would be the only way to bring him out of his furious induced state. Leaning closer to his face, she clasped her little hands on his face with both cheeks halting his trembling head and him staring right at her. Kushina-chan, he struggled to say. Though she did see the slight change in his blue eyes, it didn't completely change from his bloodthirsty ones. Taking a deep breath, she looked him in the eye. Naru-kun, I want you back to normal and I'll do anything to make it happen. Even this. And before Iroh could do anything, the 7-year-old leaned closer to Naruto's face, and before the blonde knew it, his lips were linked together with Kushina's own, shocking him to his very core, while Iroh's eyes just went wide in comical proportions till they could quite possibly pop out. Kyuubi, inside the seal, silently cheered her container on for such an action. Naruto's clearing up blue eyes looked into the determined violet ones of Kushina. That was it needed before Naruto's bloodlust state crumbled away, and a blush of monumental proportions erupted onto his face. Kushina wasn't any better. The little girl just kissed her best friend. Though, she did hide it quite well when her eyes showed contentment when she kissed him. Breaking apart quickly, Kushina laid her hand in the crook of Naruto's shoulder and spoke, "In Naruto-kun, don't change like that. I don't wanna see you become like that again. Please, don't," she said. His wide eyes quickly softened, and before Iroh knew it, linked his arms around the crying girl's frame and hugged her tight to him. He placed his head on her shoulder while whispering words to her. I'm sorry, Kushi-chan. I never wanted you to see that side of me. But I won't ever let it happen again. That I promise you." This made Kushina's face break into a wide smile, and before the blonde knew it, Kushina pushed him back on the bed with her small frame over his own. Thank you Naruto-kun. She squealed before seeing the position she was in. Even for a 7-year-old, it was quite embarrassing. She was straddling his stomach with her hands on muscular chest and her face inches from his own. Upon seeing this, they both gained monumental blushes, but didn't break out of the position. Naruto moved his head slightly to Iroh, and to his irritation saw not only Iroh, but many nurses and shinobi alike looking at the scene with knowing smirks or, aw, looks. Iroh-sama, can we talk later? Which the snickering man just nodded, having too much trouble holding in his laughter. It wasn't every day you see your 7-year-old daughter get her first kiss and then get in such a position in one day, but also with her childhood best friend. He honestly saw the two would look perfect together. After ushering everyone out of the room much to their disappointment, since they wanted to watch the scene between the two little tykes, much to their embarrassment. When they left, Iroh went out the door due to the glare from his Masumi, which scared him to the core. It told him the message quite clearly. She wanted alone time with Naruto and he would allow it. Back inside the room, neither of the two had moved yet until Naruto slightly moved his arms a bit and placed them on Kushina's shoulders. Upon doing this, Kushina went rigid and looked at him with curious eyes. Smiling a little, he spoke. Kushina-chan, are gonna stay on top of me like this all day or what? With a small blush on his face, blinking, the girl saw her position and quickly was sitting beside Naruto, whistling innocently, but Naruto just chuckled at her form of trying to act innocent. Kushina-chan, we need to talk about what just happened, okay? He said, worried for her. When she heard this, her head dropped a little, thinking Naruto would be angry at her. She felt his eyes upon even now. Naruto saw her state quickly change to a saddened one, and he immediately understood. She probably hated herself for doing something so strange at her age with him, but it was necessary to calm him down, plus he did quite like it. Looking upon her form, he gently raised his left arm and did see her flinch of her body, seeing the shadow of his left arm raise. She couldn't quite possibly think I would hurt her. Quickly he pulled her into a hug with his left arm, pulling her form into his form while wrapping his right arm around her body. He wanted to do anything to soothe her worries. What he did back there, he never wanted Kushina to see, and for her to bring him back from the brink of insanity was quite a feat. His respect for the girl's courage was even higher than it already was. Kushina stiffened when he wrapped his arm around her, but she froze completely when his arm wrapped around her. She couldn't speak or do anything except stay frozen in place. So when Naruto's face went to her ear, she heard him speak 5 words that broke the proverbial dam of emotions. Just let it out, Kushina-chan. And she did. Not a second later, tears started to swell up in her eyes before she stated, crying into Naruto's bandages chest. It escalated into soft cries, into loud wails which were slightly muffled as she was against his chest the whole time. She let out all her emotions, ranging from when she saw his injured form, from his bandaged body on the bed, to finally his enraged state going wild. Letting out the emotions she kept down were freely coming out like a waterfall. Naruto just sat there holding Kushina's trembling and wailing form and hugged her tighter. He honestly felt like the worst person in the whole Kami-forsaken world. To have Kushina like this, he truly felt like a fool. How did he not see her hidden emotions when he was around her and the times he taught her in the shinobi arts? He lowered his head, his hair shadowing his eyes, and spoke. I'm so sorry, Kushi-chan. I've been a horrible friend to you, haven't I? Kushina's head perked up and looked at his face with her big red puffy eyes with tear marks on her face. No, you haven't. Why, you've been great to me. It's just. I worry for why you, Naruto-kun. She said. Naruto raised his head to have his own eyes meeting hers. The silence between the two was tense, until Kushina acted first. Taking the first step, The little red head slowly went closer to Naruto's face with her violet eyes gazing into his sapphire ones. She interlocked her lips with his own in a small kiss which in adults' eyes would find adorable or cute, but to Naruto it told him so much more. The boy stiffened at the action, but slowly closed his eyes and leaned into it, enjoying the sensation he was feeling when being kissed by Kushina. He didn't know what it was, maybe he was too young to know, but didn't care as long as Kushina was with him. He didn't have a care in the world. Kushina closed her eyes as well and leaned in as well, deepening the kiss just a bit, before they broke apart and her leaning her head on his shoulder, hiding her blush that could rival the sun itself. Speaking softly, "Kushi-chan, I need to say, I'm sorry for putting you through that, but also, what was the kiss for?" he said, confused, but won't deny he liked the feeling. Kushina didn't avert her eyes when she looked at him, but the blush on her face grew intensely. "In Naruto-kun, I'm too young to know what this feeling is, but I do say this. I like you," she said quickly, but Naruto heard it loud and clear. Kushina expected many things to happen when she said that, but what she didn't expect was for him to raise her head up to see him looking at her with a strange look in his eyes, but she diverted her attention to the sudden feeling of Naruto giving her a slight kiss on the lips before pulling her into a hug. "I see. I'll tell you the truth then. I like you to Kushi-chan," he said, getting a blush from, but quickly embraced herself in Naruto's arms, enjoying his warmth. "Good. Then I wanna stay in your arms a bit longer, Naru-kun," she said softly before drifting off into a light sleep, earning a chuckle from him, but he slowly started to feel the effects of sleep taking over. With that he settled himself on the bed, laying down with Kushina's form over his own and her head laying in the crook of his shoulder facing his way. Resting his head atop hers, he let his eyes drift a bit before falling asleep. A few minutes later, Iroh would come upon the scene of his Masumi in the embrace of his brother's adopted son. He could see something big happened with the content smiles on their faces, but already knew he would never know what truly happened. 2 days later, Iroh's office. Naruto sat in front of his leader with Kushina by his side. He was released a day ago. So resting for the day, he went to see Iroh so he could understand what truly happened after he blacked out during his fight with the cages. Every time he asked, people would just say it was better for Iroh to tell him. So here he was sitting with Kushina holding his hand with a serious expression on her face, which was quite odd for a 7-year-old. Iroh in front of them was sporting a hardened expression, which actually hid his curiosity of the two before him. Ever since yesterday they were much closer than before. He's seen them together almost all the time, but now they were practically inseparable. Shaking his head of those thoughts, he spoke, "Well, Naruto, since you can't remember what happened during that battle, I'll tell you, but I myself and everyone else truly never saw it. We were told by someone that seen the battle firsthand. So what I might tell you will be quite shocking." Single quote. Naruto just nodded grimly, needing to know what happened after he blacked out. Sighing, he explained. He told him of the report when Onoki released the scroll, ignoring the warning the Raikage gave him, and showed the dead body of his father to him. This resulted with Naruto's eyes narrowing dangerously, but a slight squeeze of his hand from Kushina comforted him a bit, but did not ease his anger toward the old cage. Iroh explained to him also that when the body was shown to him, he practically snapped and went over his limit. "Basically, Naruto, all we know is that you were reported to have done something unimaginable, for when you lost yourself in your rage and anger. You did something unimaginable. I don't know how you did it, but you did. You, Naruto, even without intentionally doing it, caused massive tremors in the earth itself. It was reported you grabbed the air itself and ripped it apart, creating upheavals the size of a biju, making fissures that would sink a shinobi village, and an earthquake strong enough to shake the elemental nations itself. Hell, we have reports coming from all corners of the nations saying they felt the slight shockwaves of the earth itself moving. So I ask you, Naruto, what did you do?" he said. Naruto just sat there wide-eyed, but no other visible reaction from him. Kushina though was a different story. Her eyes were comically wide and her jaw was on the floor. They both were shocked to hear Naruto did such a thing, and with the earth itself. Even Kyuubi within Kushina was greatly impressed. To hear Naruto to do such a thing was now telling Hibiju Naruto was no normal human. Hell, she was having a hard time to even call him human with what he's done so far. The only Biju she knows that had that kind of control to manipulate the earth like that was the Aikibi, and even then all he had was slight control over the earth and mastery over sand. She herself, despite what legends portray her as, couldn't do what Naruto did. Sure, she could cause tsunamis and levels mountains with a swing of her tail, but to cause earthquakes to shake the elemental nations themselves? Nah, no way in hell could she do that even on her best of days. Wow, Kushina said, breaking the silence. Naruto raised his head up to look at Iroh. Iroh-sama, I don't know how I did that honestly, I don't even remember what happened, but just bits and pieces here and there, he said, getting a nod from the man. I see, it's understandable to have done what you did before fighting those two, it's no wonder you can't remember much, he said. Nodding, he gave a side glance to Kushina before looking back at Iroh, though, this has shown me something, Iroh-sama. No doubt this has brought much more attention to the Uzumaki clan than what they wanted, am I right? Getting a grim nod from the man while Kushina looked a bit confused. But, that's good, right? I mean, having a reputation would tell those that would try to attack us to back off, wouldn't it? She said, confused entirely. Wouldn't that stop all the wars coming to their borders? Shaking his head, Iroh responded, no Masumi, it actually makes things pretty bad for us, for you see now the other shinobi villages know that we have such a shinobi in our clan and will feel threatened. So it can end up pretty bad for us. But to fix this problem is the question, he murmured. But Naruto heard him and spoke with a sad look to Kushina. I know one way that I think will truly fix this, or at the least get the attention off your backs, he said. Iroh looked up to Naruto's face with a curious look in his eyes. Really? What is it then? But from the downcast look coming from the blonde he knew it could be bad for him or the clan in general. Well, the only way I can think of is that I disappear, to take the attention of the clan and onto myself, he said, getting a confused look from Kushina, but a shocked one from Iroh. And Naruto, you don't mean to, only to his fear a nod from the spiky blonde boy. Yes, if you think about it, it's truly the only way to ward them off the clan. Besides, I couldn't bear to see the clan hurt because of me. The conversation was making Kushina worried, especially the horrified eyes of Iroh and the sad ones of Naruto's, so she spoke. Naruto-kun, what do you plan on doing? What do you mean by disappear? Worried of what he was talking about, but she received no answer from the two, making her worries grow. That's when Naruto spoke again. What I mean, Kushi-chan, is I plan to erase my existence from the world for a while, hiding my presence from everyone, never to be heard for a long time. He saw the sudden look of horror on her face and quickly continued to ease her thoughts. Don't worry, I won't be gone long. Iroh-sama here can give me a long-term mission, which would last at least a year. That way it would throw off the heat the clan is getting from my actions and also allow me to train to get stronger. He got a deadpan look from Iroh, which was saying loud and clear. Seriously, you wanna get stronger? But I don't want you to go, she said, looking him in the eye with a sad look in her eye. Violet orbs flinched at her look, but remained resilient. I know, Kushi-chan, but I don't got another choice. Besides, it will only be a year, right, Iroh-sama? Which got a nod from the man who couldn't help but agree with Naruto's logic. See? Besides, when the year is over, I'll come straight back to you, so don't worry, okay? He said, gently trying to soothe the tearing redhead. Hanging her head low, she spoke, PP promise. She murmured silently, but Naruto heard her and scooted closer to her, picked her up and set her on his lap. This got a wide-eyed look from Iroh and a small eep from Kushina, but that soon stopped when she looked into Naruto's eyes. They stared at each other a few seconds before Naruto closed the distance and in a move that shocked Iroh to the very core. Kissed Kushina on the lips, though the small little girl blushed at the action, first accepted it and leaned into it a bit. They stayed like that a few minutes, not seeing the gaping Iroh watching the scene, before softly breaking apart with Kushina leaning against his form and him holding her closely. Kushina looked up into Naruto's eyes and spoke. Fine. I'm okay with it, as long as you come back to me, got that? She said, poking him in the chest with a look that said, you better or you shall feel my wrath. Chuckling, he nodded with that. She leaned against him, feeling safe in his arms. Iroh, seeing enough, spoke, what did I just see? Said a wide-eyed Iroh. Naruto and Kushina both blinked and looked at him before blushing up a storm. They forgot he was there. Uzumaki clan compound main gates. Standing in front of the entrance to the clan, Naruto was there with Kushina in front of him, as was Iroh. Behind him was a crowd of his comrades and friends he's made with the clan. It was announced, Naruto was gonna be leaving on a long-term mission to the shinobi of the clan, which word soon spread throughout the whole clan. So they chose to see him off. Despite he wasn't a Uzumaki by blood, he was a Uzumaki in everything else. Looking at the crowd, Naruto waved at them with a smile before turning his attention to Iroh. He stood at attention when he saw the serious look in his eyes. Naruto, are you sure you wanna do this? You don't have to. Only to have Naruto shake his head in response. No, Iroh-sama, I know this is the only way. Any other would possibly endanger the clan, and I would rather die than let that happen. Plus, Tu-san would agree with me on this one if he was here, with a sad tone when he spoke of Ryu. Iroh held his head low. Naruto was shown the body of his father in the morgue before he left. The boy was silent ever since then. Sighing, I guess you're adamant about this. Just remember Naruto to come back at the end of this year, okay? He said, which Naruto nodded at. Sure, I won't forget. With that, he turned his gaze to the teary-eyed Kushina and kneeled before her. Unstrapping his pack, Naruto opened up his arms. Well, come give me a hug, Kushina-chan, and he did. Kushina tackled into his arms and buried her face into his chest, hiding her shedding tears. Naruto felt them though and rubbed her back soothingly. Iroh watched the scene with a small smile. Soon after Naruto and Kushina's episode, he was explained about their relationship and promised to keep it under wraps. Though, he greatly found Naruto being with Kushina perfect for each other. He still remembered back when they were both kids, or in Kushina's case younger. It was like a brother-sister relationship, but over the years it evolved into more, though they both were too young to know what they were feeling. They knew they both shared something for each other and kept each other as close as they could to one another. Looking upon them now, he allowed a small smile grace his face. After soothing her a bit, Naruto pulled away to look at her face. He saw the tear marks upon her face, so with a gentle rub from his thumb, he wiped the tears from her eyes. No need to cry now, Kushi-chan, I'll be back before you so dry those tears. You wanna be tough, don't you? He said amusingly. She quickly responded by rubbing her eyes furiously with her small hands. Upon seeing this, he chuckled before seeing her stop and look at him with red puffy eyes. I know. I just had something in my eyes, she said, but Naruto knew she was lying. She was always a bad liar. Quickly giving her a small kiss on the cheek, he whispered in her ear. Kushi-chan, my answer to the promise you had me keep is yes. With that, he put the shocked Kushina on the ground before grabbing his sack of supplies. Ruffling Kushina's hair a bit, he walked on with a smirk, knowing Kushina would be in that state for a while and he would be gone before she was out of it. Giving a nod to the amused Iroh, Naruto walked on with the gates closing behind him. Looking over his shoulder, he gave a goodbye to those waving at him and a wink to Kushina. When the gates closed with a resounding boom, Naruto's face contorted into a hardened one, fit for a veteran shinobi, not fit for a child his age. Time to go. he said, before jumping from where he was and into the forest toward the docks so he can safely leave Uzu no Kuni to begin his training in solitude. He briefly wondered, what's gonna happen in the next year? If only he knew. 1 year later, Uzu no Kuni's forests. It has been a year since Naruto's leaving of the Uzumaki clan, or what is known to the elemental nations, his disappearance. Ever since then, like how the boy predicted, the attention on the clan itself was quickly gone and focused on finding Naruto. Though, no one to those that tried to find was irritated they couldn't find a single piece of evidence that would lead to him. Mostly, Kumo and Iwa was annoyed they couldn't find him so they could kill him for what he did a year ago. Konoha also sent Anbu to try and find him, on Hiruzen's orders, so he could meet the boy that was already a legend amongst the shinobi lands. Though what no one else knew was that Hiruzen and his teammates were trying to capture Naruto, and try to make him loyal to Konoha since he was a very powerful shinobi. The treaty they have with Uzu no Kuni was still in balance, but with how much Konoha oversteps its boundaries, the treaty wasn't anything but a piece of paper. But many things have happened over the year. For one, battles have appeared constantly over the elemental nations, with each of them corresponding with each other strangely. The battles was in reality a cloaked stranger killing off missing nin of S rank or higher. There wasn't much said about the person, only that he wore a tattered black cloak and atop the man's head was only a bell-strapped straw hat. White cloth was reported to be attacked at the ends to shadow his face. This person was said to be targeted by not only Iwa, but also Kumo and also Konoha for his decimation of their shinobi and sudden attacks on their respective villages. The man didn't have a name, but was given one by a person that survived long enough to tell how he fought before he was killed soon afterwards. He was called the Kami no Saigai to Senso, god of disaster and war. The name proved correct when he was seen killing armies left and right from respective villages from Iwa, Kumo or Konoha. Though, he was seen in Kiri during the start of the Bloodline Wars. It was said, this strange man fought and killed the Sandaime Mizukage, but the body was never reported to be found. But, he was soon reported to be seen as a hero to the growing rebel forces that were fighting for Kiri at the time. Soon afterwards, it was said he was seen in Demon Country. What he was doing there no one knew, but soon after his leave the people regarded him as a savior of their people and their priestess. But, the one thing that marked this mysterious man the most wanted man by all three villages was when he was seen in the borders of Kumogakure fighting an army of Kumo nin. But what this wasn't any surprise, since the man was rumored to have the power to fight off armies of shinobi like pigs to the slaughter. It was what he fought next that made him the most feared person in the shinobi world. He decimated the army, but ended up fighting the Biju, Hachibi, the eight-tailed ox cephalopod, and he was winning. This cloaked stranger, after a almost titanic battle with the Biju actually releasing its Amari. Even then, after the destructive beam, the man was able to bring down the rampaging Biju by beating it into the ground with pure physical strength alone. They didn't know how, but the man was able to kick, punch or even grab and slam the Biju into the ground multiple times during the fight. So, when the man gave a chakra-charged piledriver, it knocked the beast out, and with the man leaving the war-torn battlefield without a scratch. That day marked the man a threat to many, but also a warning to those that to approach the man with extreme caution. I mean, who would attack a person that had the power to physically beat the Hachibi after taking down an army of shinobi and walk away without a scratch? The man was put into the bingo book as the top of the list dangerous shinobi. Name: unknown. Title: Kami no Saigai to Senso, god of disaster and war. Occupation: bounty hunter, shinobi. Abilities: bloodline. There is no report of a bloodline with the man, but his abilities are in an all-around in all subjects of a shinobi. Taijutsu: beyond cage level. Kenjutsu: beyond cage level. Fuinjutsu: unknown. Ninjutsu: beyond cage level. Genjutsu: unwan. Kinjutsu: unknown. Rank: Z, the first ever person in history to be given such a rank, for his dangerous reputation and abilities. He was titled with the rank for not only destroying armies, but also the first person to ever beat a Biju into submission with not only single-handedly, but also with just taijutsu. History. He is wanted by Iwa and Kumo for his decimating of their armies and weakening of their villages' defenses. Also wanted by Konoha for his part in the war, when he appeared in the middle of the battlefield and started to slaughter all Konoha nin in his way. He is respected by many countries: Nami no Kuni, Kurigakure, Togakure, Snow Country, Demon Country, Tea Country, and many more. Not much else is known about the man except that he is to be left alone at all cost. Lest you risk your life. On sight. Flee, don't provoke him. There was also a small picture on the bingo book, of the man in his cloak visage holding the dead body of a Iwa nin by his throat and a piles of bodies littering around him with his cloak soaked in the blood of his enemies. All in all, he was the true nightmare to many, but a hero to those that truly knew him. But no one truly knows the man's name. In the forest of Uzu no Kuni, we see a man standing at the stature of 5 feet 5, wearing a tattered black cloak and a bell-strapped straw hat. Not much else could be seen about this person except the calm aura he had radiating off his body. As the man was walking, he raised his head a bit to see the gates of the Uzumaki clan coming to his sight. So unseen by all, a small smile came upon his face. "I'm almost home." That's when he stopped before crouching down. When he did so, the cloaked man jumped straight up with an incredible height. The members of the Uzumaki clan saw the sudden speeding black dot go into the air. So, shinobi were sent out to see what it was, so when they all came to the main gates to see the black dot coming down over the gates. With them was Uzumaki Iroh and his 8-year-old Masumi Uzumaki Kushina, looking at the incoming humanoid figure coming down at fast speeds. Seeing this, "Get out of the way!" Iroh shouted before jumping back, as did Kushina. Good thing they did, for when the man landed he created a 10-meter-sized crater. The man's cloak flapping in the sudden landing. Those that recognized his appearance paled at seeing him. Though Iroh was eyeing him with suspicion while Kushina looked at the man in wonder. The little girl herself had grown over the last year. She stood at a height of 4 feet 10, pretty tall for her age. Her hair had grown out much longer till it reached her lower back. She had dumped herself into her shinobi training after Naruto left. She started to greatly impress her clan in her ability in Fuinjutsu. She was already getting close to a level matching Naruto's own, but she didn't slack in other subjects. She trained as much as she could in all. She trained day and night, honing her skills until the day Naruto came back so that she could show how much stronger she had gotten. Kyuubi, over the year, was helping her in the training with Genjutsu since it was her weakest subject. All in all, Kushina was already past Genin level as a shinobi and was quite close to being a mid-chunin. Her skills in Fuinjutsu though were mid to high Junin hands down. Hell, her 2-san was already telling her in a couple more years she would probably pass Naruto's own skill in the art, and he was a master not seen since Uzumaki Mito's age. Back at the sight of the cloaked man, all the shinobi had their weapons drawn, waiting for what the man would do. Though Iroh was having a tiny amount of curiosity of who this man was. Kushina though remembered what today was. It was the same day Naruto left. Widening her eyes, she took a step forward to the man. While Iroh was about to pull her away, he heard her speak. "In Naruto-kun, is that you?" she asked timidly, which was unusual to be in the hyper-redhead's tone. Everyone else widened their eyes and tore them at the cloaked stranger. He hadn't moved at all except the slight exchange of his head tilting to the right. Until they heard the man chuckling. "Ha ha ha, guess I was found out," he said and grasped the straw hat on his head, and with a gasp from Kushina and Iroh, the man tore off the straw hat to show a golden spiky mane of hair sticking up. The man's face was rugged and masculine with a handsome look upon his visage. The man's eyes were the color of the deepest ocean with a slight tint of yellow mixed in. His irises were surprisingly slit, not like a fox's, but of something else. They looked like the eyes of a predator, but they were filled with warmth and compassion to all those around him and especially Kushina, who was running at him with a big smile on her face which was as big as his own. "Hey guys. I'm back," he said. "Naruto-kun," Kushina shouted, jumping into his arms before he twirled her around before throwing her into the air before catching her. "Man, Kushi-chan, you sure have grown, haven't you?" he said with a grin while she grinned back. "That's right, Uzumaki-d. Naruto is back." The whole populace of the Uzumaki clan looked at the cloaked form of their very own Uzumaki-d. Naruto in shock, after a year being on his year-long mission. The man before them didn't look like he changed one bit from the year that had passed by. The only true differences they could see different about him was the facial features of his face. His eyes had flecks of a golden yellow within them. The last thing was the aura he expelled. It was like nothing from a year ago. The last time they were around him, his aura just felt so chaotic and uncontrollable. Like a ticking time bomb ready to explode, but now his aura just showed how calm he was. It's like not even if an attack happened would change his posture one bit. Though many recognized the cloak on his body since it was the same one from that man. The man who has most of the hidden villages on edge, but to them was in reality a living legend. Linking the two together, many went wide-eyed or just plain lost their posture. Iroh was in the same predicament. Here his adopted nephew just returned. Only to look just like the very man that is the most wanted shinobi in the elemental nations. Looking at Kushina's smiling face, Naruto grinned before looking around himself to see the shocked crowd of his clan and gave a wave. "Yo." With that, the most casual wave from probably the most dangerous man in the elemental nations, made the whole Uzumaki clan face fall all in unison. Seeing this, not only Kushina, but Naruto both outright laughed. Ha 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 ha. 2 hours later, Iroh's office. "Okay. Let me get this straight here, you." Iroh said, pointing at Naruto's cloaked form, who was holding his Masumi on his lap, who at the moment was actually asleep at the moment. It had only been 2 hours since his arrival and already the clan was tremendously happy to see Naruto again. Even the shinobi tried to get to him and ask how he had been holding up since his departure from the clan. Kushina had none of that since she just wanted him to herself, and she did by pulling him away from them all, leaving a dust trail in her wake. Right now he had been told of Naruto's actions during the time he was gone, and right now he was trying to grasp the fading reality that was true and what was not true. For the things his nephew had done was just so insane. Not only have you been training in isolation for the entire year, but also been coming in and out of hiding to not only kill off Iwa and Kumo's armies that have been nesting in our borders, but also been killing Konoha's own shinobi. Why in Kami's name did you do that? He said, confused yet again for why his nephew did such a thing. Of course he knew of Naruto's hate for Konoha and their history of lies and betrayed agreements with them. Ever since Naruto read the treaty between them and Konoha and them trading over Mito in the past to the Shadaime as the balance for the treaty. Naruto's hate for them had been very strong, especially since the Shadaime not only had her chained down to him in marriage, he had used Mito as a leverage to control the Uzumaki in some way. Hell, he couldn't blame Naruto really since he too hated Konoha, but couldn't destroy the treaty since it was the only thing keeping them from total destruction. If it wasn't for that, he would have destroyed the treaty long ago. Grinning, Naruto spoke, "You want the truth or just the lie that makes it more entertaining?" Oh yes, there was also that. Naruto's attitude changed also. He was more of a joker now, being as sarcastic as Kushina is sometimes. Sighing, he waved his hand. "The truth, boy, and don't leave anything out," which made Naruto's aloof posture quickly change to the same demeanor Iroh knew a year ago. "There's the Naruto I remember. Well, it's because they've outright broke the treaty. They did it without the Uzumaki clan knowing," getting a shocked look from Iroh. "How? What did they do?" Worried yet bubbling anger started to build up within him. He too had an anger towards Konoha that was slowly growing each passing year. The reason? Trying to have him deliver his Masumi to them as a form of peaceful negotiations, but he knew the truth of what they would do. It would be the exact same thing the Shadaime did with Mito, and he wouldn't let that shit happen again. Though when he looked at Naruto's face he saw him looking at Kushina, sleeping form with a solemn look. That's when the reason Naruto had been doing such things came crashing down on him. Don't tell me, they've actually been sending their armies here to threaten us to hand over Kushina, didn't they? He said, rubbing his temples in irritation. Naruto just nodded firmly with a hand running through Kushina's hair, making the girl sigh happily. Yes, that's right, plus given the fact they've been sending countless Anbu to try and track me down hasn't helped either. I don't know what they're planning, Iroh-sama, but it's gonna be big, he said with a serious look on his face. The man nodded before looking at Naruto with a calculative eye. Naruto, what do you think are our chances if indeed Konoha attacks? Which made Naruto close his eyes in thought. After a few minutes, he opened his eyes and spoke. Well, I'd say we could handle them, but it's the problem if they did attack Kumo, and Iwa might take that chance to take us out. Let's not forget Suna's feelings toward us during the war, so they too might join the fight if it ever happens, which made Iroh frown. So many of their enemies would take the chance in helping against such an attack. Now if all these villages attack us all at once, we wouldn't survive such a force, getting a nod from Iroh. That is when the man gave a serious eye to Naruto, making the 10-year-old supernova eyes widen. Naruto, I want you to listen to me very carefully. If such a thing happens, I want you to get Kushina and flee from here. I won't risk having either one of you dying, with a look saying he wouldn't take a no for an answer. But I can still fight. If I were to use all my abilities to their fullest, then I could possibly pull out a win. Trying to change Iroh's decision. Only to his fear, Iroh shook his head with a small sad smile. No, you've done so much for this clan, Naruto, that I've come close to making you the heir of the clan. Getting shocked look from Naruto, but he continued. But you and Kushina's lives are not only important to me, but the whole Uzumaki clan itself, and I won't have you two dying so early in your life. That's when all the retort Naruto could say died in his throat and replaced by acceptance. If you're sure about this, but there's still the chance this might not happen. He said, only to get a look from Iroh saying. I'm not stupid, Naruto. Naruto, you as well as I know it's gonna happen or will in the future, but now I have no doubt in my mind they will come, and especially if they find out you've returned, only for Naruto to drop his head in defeat. Single quote. Fine, he said, raising his head up to look at Iroh. I'll honor your words and do it just in case this happens, which made Iroh smile. Thank you, Naruto, but now would you do me a favor and release that henge when you get the chance? I wanna see the true you. Making Naruto blink in surprise before chuckling. Seems I can't keep anything from you, can I? Well, I can't really. Making Iroh blink in surprise. What do you mean you can't? It's just a henge, right? Nothing to worry about, right? With a suspicious look on Naruto, who at the moment just chuckled. Well, let's just say I'm stuck like this. It was a mistake on my part, for when I tried to apply my gravity seals a few months ago, it did something. From what I theorized, it held back my physical structure of growing any more. Well, that is until a few days later they will break. He uttered lowly at the end, but Iroh caught it. Okay, and what will happen once they do break? Only to get a hesitant look from him. Well, let's just say when they do, the area around myself will turn into a giant crater. Let's just say that he, only for Iroh to look at him curiously. And what, pray tell, do you have those gravity seals on? Which made Naruto try while failing to look away from Iroh. Well, last I checked it was 100x, he said so low that a mouse wouldn't pick it up, but the Uzumaki clan had heard him. Loud and clear, might I add. 100xxxx. Iroh stuttered with his mouth open in shock while his eyes could possibly fall out at any moment. 100x was said to be impossible for any human, since it would break their bones and crush their organs to dust. Though right here, In front of him Naruto, the first ever Z-rank shinobi in the bingo book, had those kind of seals on him and still moving. Of course only Naruto would be able to do something like that. Shaking his head in exasperation, he asked one last question. Well, how about you tell me your training you went through over the last year? I'm curious, which was true. The things Naruto does to get stronger would put any shinobi, whether they be Kage or not, into deep exhaustion or downright a coma. Well, I've worked on my nature manipulation. Despite how good it was a year ago, I wanted it better, so I did a little experimenting and now gotten all three of my elements of Suiten, Raiden and Futon on levels I think is appropriate for now. My physical training has went great. From what you heard and seen in the bingo book, the ultimate test was with me fighting the Hachibi, he said, making Kyuubi within Kushina's seal perk up even more in attention as well as Iroh's. A test? The Hachibi was just a test to your physical strength, Iroh said with a disbelieving look on his face. Naruto just nodded. Yeah, that fight was pretty hard, had to release all my seals to take the Biju down, but I won't say it wasn't fun. Fighting that Biju was so exhilarating, he said with childlike amusement. This boy fights a Biju, wins and finds it fun. Sweet Kami above. So the fight is true, so Naruto-kun exceeded even my own expectations. I wonder how he would fare against me, he. Why are you looking at me like that? He said, which Iroh just shook his head in silent amusement. No matter how strong Naruto was, he just kept getting stronger and stronger, so he just finally gave up trying to figure out the puzzle that was Naruto. Nothing. What else did you train in? He said, curious about other parts of Naruto's training. I mean, the man in front of him swatted armies of shinobi like flies and brought down a Biju with pure physical strength, so he was a tad bit curious. Well, I also worked on my speed. Because of my tall stature, I would need the speed to counterbalance my strength, and I did. Right now I've got multiple seals on my body that have been acting as weight for both my speed and chakra. Right now, if I was to take those seals off, I honestly don't know how much chakra I'd have, since I've never taken them off before except with the fight against the Hachibi. Though at that time I was only concentrated of getting out of that Amari attack, he said at the end. I see, and what else? Iroh said, trying really hard not to faint right there. Kyuubi wasn't any better. The female Biju was having a hard time seeing Naruto as a strong mortal and not a Biju in disguise. Well, the last thing I worked on was my Kenjutsu and fine-tuning it to perfection, yet I have not found a suitable weapon ever since the last weapon snapped in half. But I did find one ability of mine I discovered a while ago. It was similar to what I did a year ago, against the Tsuchikage and Raikage, he said, getting a surprised look from both Iroh and Kyuubi, who still wondered how Naruto was able to pull off such a feat. How? Was the one word Iroh said, and Naruto just rose up his left hand before a blue sphere appeared around it. It had some kind of static running around it. Iroh looked at Naruto with a questioning look and got his answer. I don't know much of this ability, Iroh. It may have come from my birth parents or maybe a hidden bloodline, but all I know is that this right here is the key to figuring out the rest of what I did that day. With that, the sphere disappeared like it wasn't even there, making Iroh and Kyuubi both confused at such an energy. Well, what did that sphere do? Which made Naruto look away sheepishly. Narrowing his eyes, he spoke. Naruto, what does that sphere do? Making Naruto sigh, closing his eyes. Do you remember the incident about 6 months ago? When the mountains of Tsuchi no Kuni were devastated? Getting a firm nod from Iroh. Yes, it was reported 3 whole mountains that signified the land being called the Land of Earth were totally destroyed. They never found out what happened, though it was said a sound of something breaking before the mountains were destroyed. That's right, and that was me. I was testing out that sphere with my physical strength added, and that was the results of me punching the mountain, he said, making Iroh gape before finally losing it. The man just fainted while Kyuubi was repeating the words Naruto just said over and over again, before a giant grin came up on her face as she looked at Naruto's form with a strange look in her crimson-slitted eyes. Oh yes, If you did, I wonder how much stronger you'll get. It's already seen Kushina will be your mate, but I do wonder, will you be worthy enough for a biju, I wonder. Aoi, Iroh. Wakey wakey. Naruto said comically, slapping Iroh in face, trying to wake the man up, only to his failure he wasn't. Hanging his head low, Naruto looked at Kushina in his arms and smiled. Well, I can always talk to him later, because I think you need your sleep, Kushihime, he said before giving her a kiss on the cheek. He picked her up before shifting her form a bit till he had her in a bridal carry with her, using his chest as pillow. With that he walked away to find her room and put her to bed. 1 week later with Naruto. It's been a week since Naruto's return to the Uzumaki clan, and things have been normal and peaceful for the clan and Uzu no Kuni as a whole. The blonde had been spending his time mostly with Kushina since she had been very clingy to him. Though he didn't mind really, since he had missed her greatly over the year he was gone. So yeah, he didn't really mind the fact they held hands walking side by side, or the fact he held Kushina on his shoulders during the time he was back. Though he would hear rumors from his fellow clansmen of his relationship with Kushina, but he didn't deny them, neither did Kushina. They were too young for the more adult things, but that didn't mean they couldn't hug or hold each other. Though right now we could find Naruto at the moment cursing his luck, for now his peaceful return just got shot to hell. His return somehow was leaked from Uzu no Kuni by a spy from Kumo. The man was quickly killed by him, but the damage was done and all of the elemental nations knew he was back. And that meant chaos would follow. And it did. I can't believe this, Naruto shouted as the people around him were in a similar state, just not as vocal. Around him were the high officers of the Uzumaki army and their government. Many would think they would be snobbish, stuck up the assholes, but no. They were quite the opposite, and Naruto was friends with each one of them since he himself had taken the rank of his father Ryu as the first commander of the Uzumaki army. Right now all of them had serious looks on their faces, as did Iroh. They just received reports of what Naruto predicted to come true. Iwa, Kumo and Suna joined forces and were heading their way to Uzu no Kuni so they could wipe them out for good. The one that reported was soon killed along with his squad from the invading force. Iroh closed his eyes in thought before speaking. Naruto, I told you when you came here that if this were to ever happen, do you remember what I told you to do? He said, making Naruto grit his teeth in anger yet the growing sadness of what Iroh was implying. Everyone else was already informed if this were to happen, and to the shock of Naruto agreed with Iroh. They just couldn't let them get him or Kushina. Damn it. I didn't want this to happen. God damn it, this place is my home. I can't leave it when it's gonna be destroyed. Only for Iroh to slap him across the head. Shut up, Baka. We know how important the clan is to you, but you have something more important to worry about. I've never told you, Naruto, but I will now. You and Kushina are what the Uzumaki clan symbolize. You both are what we will be leaving behind when we die, he said, making Naruto's eyes go wide before closing them to hide his emotion. You both will be our legacy to the world. I know how you feel about her as she feels about you. Even if you're not Uzumaki by blood, you're Uzumaki in everything else, Naruto, and I would be damn proud if you were the one Kushina lived with, since I know you would protect her with your life, he continued with a prideful smile on his face. The others just smiled as well. Naruto looked at them all before bowing his head in defeat. But, first Ryu, now the clan, he uttered, which they all heard and felt for him. The boy, their clan's pride, was losing everything before him, first his adopted father and now soon his clan. Though they never did see the slight glimmer in Naruto's eyes, but they did hear his next few words. Very well, I'll be taking our leave right now, he said, but they felt the underlying message in his words and frowned. Naruto's gonna do something crazy again. Iroh looked at the back of his nephew with worry, but acceptance showing brightly in his eyes, knowing Naruto would do everything in his power to protect Kushina and give her the life she needs. Clan head compound -1 hour later. It had been an hour since Naruto left to prepare his and Kushina departure from Uzu no Kuni, but even now the burning anger for what was happening to his home burned within him. His hate and anger toward those that were invading grew even more. It was starting to make him tremble in anxiety to not just use everything in his power to wipe them all out. But then he would without a doubt destroy Uzu no Kuni as well. Having the storage scrolls sealed up with all of his belongings, Naruto walked into Kushina's room to see the little kunoichi in training studying her fuinjutsu. Looking up from the massive piles of scrolls, Kushina grinned. "Oh hey Naruto-kun, I'm just reading up on some late-night fuinjutsu study before I got to bed, promise not to tell To-san, okay?" She said slowly at the end when she saw the serious look in Naruto's eyes. "Kushina-chan, we have to leave. I'll explain later, but right now it's important if we left right now," and the reaction he predicted came. Kushina's eyes widened before crawling out of the piles of fuinjutsu scrolls and ran up to him with a curious look on her face. "What are you talking about? What's wrong?" she said, worried of what Naruto was talking about. Sighing, Naruto shook his head. "I'm sorry, but I don't have time to explain, but all I can say is that by the order of Uzumaki Iroh, I am to escort you out of Uzu no Kuni and keep you safe from now on, as your eternal guardian," he said formally. Flashback 30 minutes earlier. "Naruto, by my order, I ask you to take Kushina away from here and to protect her with your life," he said, standing in front of his nephew in front of the Uzumaki clan compound, as the shinobi and protectors of the clan all rushed pasted them to the gates to prepare for the battle. They both didn't Kushina to hear the sounds, so Naruto placed a silencing seal on the compound so she wouldn't hear the noises from the outside. Looking at his adopted uncle, Naruto sighed while looking at the massing forces of the Uzumaki clan. "I don't have a choice. I accept, but is there anything you want me to give her, anything at all?" he said, looking at the armored Iroh, who was now prepared for the battle that will undoubtedly end in his death. Closing his eyes, Iroh formed a small sad smile on his face. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a scroll with the Uzumaki insignia and a small locket. The second item caught Naruto's attention, and looking at Iroh confirmed his suspicion. "You want me to give her this? I'm guessing you won't go see her again, will you?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Iroh just chuckled sadly and shook his head. "Nah, I can't. If I did, I'd probably have doubts about leaving her, but this is for the best," which made Naruto look away and close his eyes. Very well, it shall be done. I'll have her and leave in a few minutes." Naruto, thank you. Flashback end. Shaking his head of the recent thoughts, he looked down to see Kushina's confused yet worried face. Why is To-san ordering me to leave? Did I do something wrong?" she said, tears welling up in her eyes. Quickly he pulled her into a hug and spoke. "No. You've done nothing wrong. If anything, it's my fault that this is happening," he said quietly, but the redhead heard what he said perfectly and frowned in thought. "How is it Naruto-kun's fault?" I have a theory that Naruto's return has been leaked to the other countries by someone, and now the Uzumaki clan's enemies have reared their attention back onto the clan itself. But if that's true, then what's this got to do with what To-san is doing? Well, Kushi-chan, I am only running on a theory here, but from what I can see that something big is happening, and Iroh wants you and Naruto out of Uzu no Kuni as fast as possible. But the question is, what's going on? Kushina. Hearing her name, she shook her head to see Naruto looking at her with a stern yet saddened gaze. "I'm sorry, it's because of me that this is happening. No doubt Kyuubi-san has told you of what it thinks is going on, but right now we have to get moving." With that, he got a hesitant nod from her and started to seal all of her belongings. Her fuinjutsu scrolls, ninja tools, books and scrolls for Nin-ken-tai Genjutsu. After which he sealed up all of those scrolls into a secondary scroll and placed it into his vest pouch. Kushina watched all of this with her worry growing stronger with each passing second, since Naruto's face was showing signs of worry and anger. Something she rarely ever saw on his face before. Seeing everything safely sealed away, he turned to Kushina and crouched down with his back facing her. "Okay, Kushina-chan, Get onto my back and hold on tight for we will be going very fast, he said, not seeing the look of extreme worry on the Harem of the Uzumaki clan's face. Feeling the oncoming disturbance to the compound he yelled, "Hurry Kushina!" She quickly jumped onto his back wrapping her arms around his neck while he held her legs firmly and, then with a mighty jump, he leapt out of the compound just in time before the compound itself to quickly explode in a fiery blaze of shrapnel and burning wood. Kushina snapped open her eyes to see her once upon a time compound and home destroyed, burning in what seemed like an explosion. That's when the sounds of fighting and screams of battle reached her ears, so scanning the area all she saw from what she could see was the shinobi of her clan fighting shinobi of either Kumo, Iwa and Suna. All around from what she saw was fire and destruction left in the wake of the massive battle that was in front of her. That's when she spoke. What's going on here? I was right. Damn. What's happening, Q-chan? It would seem that my theory was correct. And Iwa, Kumo and even Suna have come to attack and completely annihilate the clan forever, and try and kill Naruto-kun here. Realization came into her eyes and looked worryingly at Naruto. Is that why father ordered for them both out of Uzu no Kuni? To get away from the invading force? Is that why Naruto blames himself for what is happening to their home? The baka. Naruto scowled at seeing all the destruction in front of him. The sky itself was pitch black in color from all the smoke of the fires rising into the sky. The scent of blood filled his nose and the sense of death all around him. The pain-filled screams of his fellow clansmen filled his ears as well as those explosions of his home getting destroyed. Naruto-kun, look out, she said, making him snap his eyes open only to curse loudly. Fuck. Before jumping over a Doden jutsu aimed right at him. That's when he heard the crunching of multiple footsteps, and from the gasp filled full of terror from Kushina he knew it had to be bad. Well, looky here, it's him, a voice dripping with venom and arrogance. Naruto scowled at what was in front of him while Kushina on his back wrapped her arms even tighter at what she was seeing while Kyuubi inside the seal growled in anger. For in front of the three was two brigades, one for Iwa and the other for Kumo, and at their respective leads was one masked man for both brigades with a kanji for Anbu commander in front of them. Naruto looked over the countless enemies upon countless enemies of both Iwa and Kumo and growled. I see now. Iwa and Kumo used Suna as bait to draw me out and have both Iwa and Kumo divert their whole attention on me, bastards, he uttered, which Kushina heard but was too terrified to speak. Ha ha ha. You're completely outnumbered this time, you monster. Even if you have the power to wipe out armies this time, you've got the whole forces of both Iwa and Kumo right in front of you with both the Raikage and Tsuchikage not too far away. There's no hope for you this time, said the tiger-masked Anbu leading the Iwa brigade. Seeing the inevitable battle, Naruto looked over his shoulder at Kushina with a solemn look before the sounds of her sniffles and muffled crying reached his ears. With that, the dwindling flames blazed up once again while something around him just expelled, making the whole area somehow start to shake. Kushina-chan, whatever you do, don't let go of me, this will be one hell of a ride, which made her nod while wrapping her legs around his waist as tight as she could. With that, he looked up at the arrogant looks from all the enemy shinobi in front of him and spoke, now. I'll show you why I'm so feared. He yelled before raising his right hand, which was circled by a blue sphere of some sort. Then with a mighty swing he punched, the air itself making a slight tremor erupt and the sound of glass breaking echo around the area. A moment of silence followed. Ha! What was THAAAAAATTTT? He never got to finish before a massive shockwave erupted from where the punch came from. The shockwave crashed into the shinobi forces like a god smiting its prey with a swipe of his hand. Some of the shinobi had the luck of getting out of the way of the attack, but, to the horror of many and the silent look of awe from Kushina and Kyuubi, the once massive army of the two brigades of Iwa and Kumo's finest was left with nothing more than 2/3 of their forces, with them all left in disarray. A massive trench was in front of Naruto, with it going on for about 30 miles, with it being 10 miles in width, but the blast radius was much different. It was showing immeasurable size with all that was in front of that one punch, nothing but devastation in its path. Trees uprooted, the ground turned to dust, and half a mountain clearly destroyed. Among the trench was crushed or pulverized shinobi looking like nothing from what they used to be but only that of a bloody sacks of flesh on death's door. Kushina and Kyuubi looked at the sight of power in total awe, or mostly to Kyuubi's shock. Breathing out, Naruto glared among the last of the forces that survived his attack. He couldn't do that again or risk him actually sinking the island itself. Hell, right now, he had a hard time keeping that attack under control. So when he gazed upon the last remnants of the two brigades, he counted the numbers to be past 500. Monster. He's a monster, murmured a terrified Iwa shinobi. He had just seen his allies all ready to take down Iwa and Kumo's most hated enemy and bring glory to their village. Only in that second the man let loose one punch and all of his allies, those thousands upon thousands of his allies, were all destroyed or blown away. In that one moment he looked at Naruto's body with eyes that were now filled with terror. Even their Anbu commander was completely decimated from the attack, and it was rumored they were as strong as their cages. What was to say this being before him didn't just have the power to swat cages like children? For after seeing this, reality was just shattered from him. He looked around to see a few of both forces survived and gathering up for an attack. Despite the overwhelming fear and his instincts yelling at him to run away, he gathered with them, thinking they just caught them off guard. Yet, even in the deepest reaches of his soul, he knew that they weren't gonna survive. Seeing them all gather up made Naruto scowl even more in irritation. Gripping his fist, he did a few hand seals before he heard the collective shouts from the shinobi before him. Doden. Doryuden. Earth Release. Earth Dragon Bullet was the shout of 200 of Iwa shinobi. Raiden. Raryuden. Lightning Release. Lightning Dragon was the shout of 250 Kumo shinobi. Kushina watched an incoming army of elemental dragons coming toward her with horror. She wasn't used to something like, and it was overwhelming her every second. Naruto somehow felt what she was feeling and spoke. Don't worry, Kushi-chan, I promised your father I would protect you, and I will with my dying breath, he said, not caring if the dragons were but 5 feet away from him. He looked over his shoulder and spoke with a small smile. Besides, I gotta protect my fiancé, shouldn't I? He said teasingly, and before she could even retort, Naruto swiftly brought his left hand up, and with but a swing, a blade of concentrated futon chakra came out, being the width of 50 feet. It clashed against the dragon, then a sudden explosion erupted, making the ground shake and smoke go into the air, making a small mushroom cloud hang over the small battlefield. That's when his senses kicked in, surprising Kushina. Naruto spun around quickly, only to receive a slash across his chest from a katana-wielding Iwa nin. Letting out a small grunt, Naruto took a step back and looked down to see a gash from the katana, showing it was charged with futon chakra, making it hurt all the more. Ignoring the bleeding, Naruto focused his murderous gaze upon the smug-looking Iwa nin. Ha! I injured the so-called nightmare of Iwa. This guy is pathetic, he said arrogantly, while his comrades were letting out small smug smiles as well, knowing they were catching the man off guard now and knew the man's weakness. It was the little girl on his back. Though the man that injured Naruto didn't know how bad he fucked up. Kushina looked at Naruto's wound with horror-filled eyes. The wound showed the blood practically pouring out of him. She clenched her eyes closed, knowing it was her fault Naruto was hurt. She was just being a weakness right now. Naruto felt Kushina's distress and frowned. She's crying. Does she think it's her fault? Glaring, Naruto raising his hand and grasped the shinobi by the head, and to the shock of many lifted the squirming man into the air, his feet dangling helplessly in the air. Kushina watched with terror-filled eyes as Naruto grit his teeth in anger, before clenching his fist tight, making the squirming shinobi scream loud. Ah! Let go of me! He yelled, feeling the unbearable pressure of his skull being physically caved in, squishing his brain and cracking his skull. Naruto ignored him and spoke, his voice echoing all across the battlefield. You bastards made the wrong move. in attacking my home just for the sake of finding me. You wanted a war, you'll get a war. He said, making many weak-willed suddenly pass out, scaring the shit out of few other shinobi. Especially the look in Naruto's eyes showed he wouldn't spare anyone. Kushina, close your eyes, don't peek. Kyuubi, turn off her hearing, she doesn't need to hear this. He said, knowing Kyuubi was seeing this and knew Naruto was right. Kushina would be petrified at what was about to happen. With that, Kushina closed her eyes tightly while Kyuubi turned off the hearing of her container, but did keep a mental window of the soon-to-be battle. I wanna see how much blood you will spill for your loved ones. Show me, Naru-kun, show me you're worthy. With Naruto turned his icy blue eyes upon the numerous shinobi and roared. Now you bastards will pay, all of you. With Naruto crushed the skull of the Iwa nin, showering him in blood and gore as brain matter splashed his face. The rest of the Iwa nin's dead body fell onto the ground, but it was suddenly sent rocketing by a kick from Naruto, sending it crashing into a Kumo nin, which quickly killed the Kumo shinobi due to the velocity the body hit him at, which shattered his spine completely. This scared many of the shinobi. Seeing such a display appear before them, it made many retch at such a sight, while others tried to keep control of their bladders. That's when they felt the deadly presence overcome them all. So looking at Naruto's form, they all saw him glaring at them all with his stone-cold murderous sapphire eyes with the flecks of golden amber glowing brightly. This scared them even more. It got worse when a ghostly figure appeared over Naruto, with it showing to be the apparition of a demonic-looking figure holding a scythe in its hand. Your price for angering me is death. With that, the slaughter began. Watching this slaughter was none other than the Raikage and Tsuchikage. Both had witnessed the battle from start, and now they both were now standing shocked still as they saw all their shinobi practically ripped, torn, shredded and outright dismembered. They watched as their most hated enemy slaughtered every single shinobi before him. They watched as the man no monster get cut up, slashed by katanas, stabbed by kunais or hit by dodenjutsus. The man just brushed them off, ignoring his massive injuries, and kept his pace of killing them all with their blood showering the ground and himself. I think I just shit myself, murmured the Raikage, which was indeed true, for the brown stain in his pants and the foul odor coming from him. Onoki felt the same way, since the man was on the ground back away at what he was seeing. In just a year, that monster grew strong enough to wipe out his best shinobi like they were children. Right now, Onoki truly felt the meaning of fear. I think it's best we retreat and head back to continue our attack upon Uzu no Kuni. We might not be able to kill him, but at least we can kill and destroy his clan. Onoki said, determined to at least wound his most hated enemy by destroying his home. With that, the two cages left with their prides shattered and their fears for the man raised up to new heights. Kyuubi right now having a hard time from holding back a moan of pleasure as she saw her container's mate practically slaughter all the shinobi before him like pigs. The blood and gore coated him like a blanket. It drenched him, but it suited him quite nicely in her opinion. The way he tore some of them apart was breathtaking to her. The way he killed them, the way he showed no mercy as he crushed a pleading shinobi by the head with his boot or rammed his entire fist through one mon's head. It was glorious. She knew now without a doubt, Naruto was worthy, no scratch, that he was probably the only being alive that could subdue her if he was to go berserk like he's done. Though when he looked up her container, her eyes softened. The little girl was shaking like a leaf from all the sudden movements Naruto made. It was a good thing she covered Kushina in her chakra cloak, or she too would have coated in the blood. That would have scarred the little girl for life. Though when she looked at Naruto's bloody form, his wounds only making him all the more wanting from her. She felt a shiver of excitement go down her spine. She idly wondered if Naruto was part of some demon for him to fight like he did. Naru-kun. I cannot wait our meeting, for it is sure to be exciting. Naruto, on the outside, exhaled as the bloodlust look in his eyes disappeared. He looked around himself to see the multiple bodies of his enemies strewn about, dead in the most painful ways possible, or some close to dying, just slowly bleeding to death. He looked at himself and grimaced. Kushina would have a fit if she saw him like this, and the opponent's injuries wouldn't help either. So with a quick jump, Naruto jumped into the air and into the forest while using a small sweetened jutsu to wash off the gore and blood on his body. After the quick clean-up, he made sure the smell of blood was off of him and his belongings before looking over his shoulder to see the chakra-cloaked form of Kushina still with her eyes closed and here silenced. Though when he saw her shaking like a leaf form, he grimaced before speaking. "Alright Kyuubi, bring the hearing back into her ears, we're safe for the moment." And Kyuubi did as told. The hearing came back to Kushina. So when she heard no fighting, only the sounds of crickets and the sound of water, she snapped open her eyes to see that she was now in a forest. Looking around, she saw that she was still holding onto Naruto, and that's also when she saw the worried blue orbs of Naruto staring at her. "You okay, Kushi-chan?" he said, only for her to give her immediate response. "Naruto-kun, you're okay," she said, not seeing his injuries even now since they were covered up a bit by Naruto, since she didn't want her to worry. The redhead glomped him as best as she could, her little arms small compared to Naruto's form. Sensing this, he let her hug him tightly as she rubbed her cheek against his. "As much as I love you hugging me like this, we gotta get moving, Kushi-chan, unless you wanna stay like this," he said teasingly, making the redhead blush in embarrassment. "Sorry, but let's go," she proclaimed. Chuckling, Naruto nodded. "Very well then, just hold on tight," and she did. To her eagerness, she gripped Naruto's head tightly. Naruto charged chakra into his legs, adding it with his physical strength. He jumped over the sea itself. Seeing the incoming land after crossing the sea at such fast speeds, Naruto prepped for landing. He gripped the laughing Kushina firmly as the landing quickly came into sight. Boom! With small explosion, Naruto landed right in the middle of another forest, but he was familiar with. They were the forests of Nami no Kuni. He looked to see Kushina grinning widely with her big violet orbs glittering with excitement. "WOWE, that was fun, LTS, do that again, DATTEBANE," she exclaimed, pumping her fist into the air. Naruto just chuckled at her enthusiasm at what he just did. Only she would want to do something like that again and or find it fun. While others just found it terrifying or destroyed all logic of what they knew to be impossible. That's when his mission came to mind and the cold hard realization came down upon Naruto. Turning around slightly, Naruto saw the smoking form of Uzu no Kuni and let a small tear go down his face. "I'll protect her forever, Iro-sama. Not just by your order, but since Kushina is my most precious person," he mentally thought as he gazed at the excited chatter box that was his best friend girlfriend. Patting her on the head gently, he gave her a small kiss on the cheek, earning a small blush from her, and spoke, "Let's go, Kushi-chan, we're burning night time and I promise to have you away from these borders soon." With a slow nod from the blushing girl, Naruto ran at fast speeds most couldn't catch past the forests and deeper into territory of other countries. One day later, High no Kuni borders. It's been a day since the two have traveled. First, after leaving Uzu no Kuni, they passed Nami no Kuni and crossed the borders of Kaminari no Kuni. Now they were passing through High no Kuni borders, the very country not only he, but Kushina hated with a passion. It wasn't the country they hated though, it was Konoha that nested within the country. She'd started to hate them early on in her studies of being a shinobi. As the day of traveling passed, night time had fallen and Kushina was starting to notice Naruto's tried form. He was sweating a lot and his clothes were starting to get more wet. From what she didn't know, and that worried her. Laying down a small tent, Naruto was laying down in his futon trying to block out the pain from his wounds. He hadn't had the time to heal yet. That's when he heard the entrance to his tent flap open slightly, so when he looked up slightly he saw the worried face of Kushina. "Naruto-kun, can I sleep with you? I'm scared," she said, not seeing his state of weakness. Naruto, seeing her state, fought down his one and ushered her in. She followed in and snuggled into him as he wrapped them both in a blanket. He felt her snuggle closer into his chest, while her long maroon hair covered her small frame compared to his own. He shakily wrapped her up in a hug which she quickly embraced while letting out a sigh of contempt. Now, despite his numerous injuries, he let out a small smile before kissing Kushina on the forehead before pulling her closer into him. I love you always, Kushi-hime, forever and beyond, even in death. Though what he didn't see was the small yet happy smile slowly appear on Kushina's face before she snuggled her face into his chest while the happy tears flooded out of her eyes. He loves me. He loves me. He loves me, she repeated in her mind, finalizing those words forever in her mind as well as them both in each other's embrace. That's when their moment was suddenly destroyed when Naruto's senses went haywire. Biting back the pain, Naruto grabbed Kushina and jumped out of the tent just in time from a hail of kunai to stab through the tent and into the pillow of where Naruto's head used to be. Naruto's sense of alert and danger was going out of control, but as he hid Kushina behind him, he looked around to see the moving shadows of what he already knew was shinobi. Yet he couldn't tell who they were. That is until he heard a voice. A voice he knew all too well. Kukuku, seems we meet again, Naruto, a snake-like voice echoed from the forests. Snapping his attention to the voice, Naruto hid Kushina behind him protectively and spoke, "You, if you're here, then that means." "That's right, Gaki," said a voice similar to that of male but also to that of Lecher. "It's been a long time since we've seen each other, brat," a female voice followed with a hint of bitterness in her tone. Gritting his teeth in anger, "I see, so he's sent you three after me. The old buzzard probably knew of the attack and saw that as a chance to take me out," Naruto said, confusing Kushina while some of the shadows in the forest tensed. "Don't you dare insult sensei," the Lecher-like voice yelled, making Naruto just grin. "Why not just come out already, or are you three and your little friends too scared? Is that it, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Orochimaru?" he said, speaking their three names, making Kushina's eyes go wide in recognition. "Hee, it seems you haven't lost your touch with your sensing abilities, Naruto." Single quote. Orochimaru said, coming out of the shadows with a smile that just defined that of a snake ready to get its prey. Orochimaru was a pale man, pale as death, and had snake-like yellow slitted eyes. His long black hair went past his shoulder blades. He wore a black long-sleeved shirt with a green Junin vest symbolizing him for Konoha. Around his left bicep was a Konoha headband. He wore black shinobi pants ending at the calf. His calves were wrapped in medical tape. Lastly was his black shinobi sandals and his pouch on his right leg. "I agree, but then again this Gaki isn't normal," Jiraiya said with a firm look in his eyes as they gazed at the one person Konoha hated more than Iwa and Kumo combined. The man had long white spiky hair with two red line marks going down his face. He had black eyes and tan skin. He wore the same thing Orochimaru was, except his long-sleeved shirt was blue and so were his pants. He had a pouch on his left leg. "Meh, still can't believe this brat is the same one that has sensei all worked up," Tsunade said with a hint of disbelief in her voice. The woman was dressed the exact same way as Jiraiya, only her long pale blonde hair passed her shoulders while they were both tied in two ponytails. Her brown eyes glittered with anger yet irritation. She also had fair skin that which shone greatly in night. These three were the students of Hiruzen Sarutobi, shinobi of Konoha, the Densetsu no Sannin, legendary three ninja, newly named by Hanzo the Salamander himself. They all had many differences, but one thing they all shared was one thing. And that was their rivalry with Naruto himself. It was a secret that no one knew, but that Naruto during the war was able to beat them all three into submission, and ever since they have always trained and trained to just take out Naruto before word was ever spread them three were taken out. By a child no less. "Bring out your little friends, you three, for I am in no mood for games," Naruto said with a look in his eyes that could scare an army of cages. Jiraiya flinched a bit from the look in Naruto's eyes, as did Tsunade. Orochimaru hid it very well, but he too was unnerved a bit by those eyes. "Very well then, Gaki, it's your funeral," Jiraiya said, snapping his fingers, with the whole forest was swarmed with shinobi. Looking around himself, Naruto saw that the many shinobi he saw were all of Konoha's very own, with some being their Anbu. Growling, he looked down at Kushina briefly to see her shaking form and spoke. What do you want with me? He spoke so quietly that those with even trained senses would need to strain their ears greatly to hear his words, but they heard him, which Orochimaru just smiled sinisterly. Raising his finger, the pale man spoke for his teammates and pointed at Kushina's quivering form. We are here for her, Naruto-kun, he said, making Naruto's eyes go wide while Kushina looked on terrified at what she just heard. Clenching his fist, Naruto spoke gravely. And what, pray tell, do you want with her? He said, gritting his teeth while randomly letting out a spike of killer intent, making a few shinobi tense. Orochimaru just grinned darkly and said, why, for one, she's the last of her clan and also the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. So sensei took this as his chance to get her since it was such a great time, but we never calculated for you to be with her, he said sarcastically at the end. Naruto's eyes gained a dangerous look to them, adding already to his fearful eyes. He clenched his fist so hard he drew blood and his knuckles popped. Looking down at Kushina, he saw her terrified violet eyes, and then he flinched when he felt his wounds acting up. That's also when he felt the disturbance in his chakra. His eyes mentally widened when he felt the gravity seals acting up. Damn, not now. Gritting his teeth, Naruto crouched down and spoke. Kushihime, get on my back, and whatever you do, don't let go, he said while she just nodded, fearful of what was to come. Getting onto his back once more, Naruto started to slowly release his remaining chakra and spoke in such a voice that it made many lose control of their bladders, or in the Sennin's case take a few steps back. You want her? You're gonna have to go through me, he said, and with that Naruto charged at the Sennin, the shinobi of Konoha falling behind him, charging at his back. The Sennin prepared themselves as the speeding rocket of Naruto's form coming at them with murder in his eyes. With that, the battle of not only survival began, but also the battle to protect what was precious to Naruto began. 1 hour later, the Great Ravine. The forests of Hai no Kuni, the once tall trees that stood against all, were now devastated or outright destroyed. It had only been an hour since the battle between Naruto and Konoha's strike force of Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru and their shinobi. And he was faring pretty well. That is until actually saw the many numbers Sarutobi sent after him. It was well over twice the size of both Iwa and Kumo's forces he fought early combined. It didn't help much that he was also fighting the Sennin as well, and in his weakened state it only made it all the harder for him. At their Great Ravine, the historical land that was where the Shadaime faced off against one of the Biju in the early years, was the battered and bleeding forms of the three Sennin. All three of them were greatly wounded from their battle with the wounded yet titanic Naruto. Their forces were, but destroyed or out of commission from Naruto's attacks. They only had a handful of shinobi left, and even then that was a small number compared to how many Naruto has killed. The Z-ranked shinobi himself wasn't looking good either. His wounds from fighting Iwa and Kumo were now fully opened back up, added with the freshly made wounds from his fight with Konoha's forces. His form had multiple burns, cuts, slashes and gashes of all kinds. His clothes were ruined by getting hit by dozens of Kaden jutsus. His back was riddled with Senbon, kunai and shuriken with the occasional katana or two. His face had blood going down over his eyes and blood coming out of his mouth, but his eyes were the most terrifying thing of all. They had the look of pure defiance even with his mortal injuries. His icy blue sapphire eyes glared darkly at the remaining Konoha forces and the three injured Sennin. His eyes showed even in his weakened state he wouldn't go down without a fight. Right now he was on the ground, knee first, with a worried to death Kushina crying seeing his bloody form. She climbed off only to see a Konoha nin take that as a chance to get her. Too bad for him that Naruto was still fighting, and with a quick turn, Naruto grabbed the shinobi by the neck and slammed him right into the ground, creating a small crater with the pulverized shinobi clearly dead. Kami, this kid is a monster, Jiraiya said, holding his bleeding chest in pain. He got a nod from both his teammates. Even with the kid weakened, he was still a god among fighting, and his will to not die was amazing to say the least. I agree, but even he is reaching his limit, Orochimaru stated with blood coming out of his mouth. Tsunade only nodded, too exhausted to speak and concentrating to heal the wounds she has and the low level of chakra she has right now. One more strike and take the little girl and push him off the cliff, that should finish this. Orochimaru said with his teammates agreeing fully. With Naruto we could find him at the edge of the ravine with Kushina in front of him trying to everything she could to heal him. Only to fail with his bleeding blocking out her limited knowledge of healing. Tearing up, Kushina looked up to see the coughing up blood of her best friend, but right now he was just smiling warmly at her. Despite her failures of trying to heal him, he was grateful for her to try. Kushi-chan, come here, he said, which she did, slowly walking into his awaiting arms and hugged his bleeding body with tears flowing freely down her face. Naruto wrapped his right arm around her small frame and spoke even as the light in his eyes was dimming. He could feel the life in him dimming. No matter how much he wanted to deny it, he was gonna die here, and to lose Kushina to Konoha was tearing him apart. But damn it, he would keep fighting. He would fight for just a miracle to happen. So he can help Kushina. Kushi-chan, look at me, he uttered, which she did ever so slowly despite the now incoming 3 Sennin and the forces of Konoha charging at Naruto's down form. Looking down, Naruto saw her violet-red puffy eyes looking at him with worry for him, which filled his heart with warmth. Placing a shaky hand on her cheek, he looked her in the eyes and spoke. Kushi-chan, never forget. I love you with all my heart, soul and my being. Even if we are separated, I'll come for you, just remember, and never forget. I love you, Uzumaki Kushina. With that, Naruto gave one more kiss to Kushina, kissing her on the lips, shocking her greatly since this wasn't just an accidental kiss but his intentional kiss. She felt all the love he had for her, the passion he had for her that has been with him for years since he's been with her. It brought tears to her eyes before she leaned into the kiss with him, enjoying his lips with hers. Naruto opened his eyes slightly, letting a small tear fall. Seeing the charging forces of Konoha, he could already feel his gravity seals acting abnormally, telling him they were about to explode, and he didn't know what would happen. And he would rather die than have Kushina killed by his own hands from the seals upon his body. Seeing the incoming shinobi, he separated from Kushina, slightly breaking the kiss, closed his eyes and let his last few words come out of his mouth. I will see you again, Kushina-chan. Don't forget me, is all I ask of you. And with that, Naruto closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against Kushina's own, sealing his words with a last gentle kiss to her lips. Naruto and Kushina were separated from each other as Tsunade grabbed Kushina and knocked her out from when she tried to struggle from her grasp. While her other 2 teammates along with the rest of Konoha's shinobi all struck at once where Naruto's bleeding body was. But the last few words he spoke before the explosion happened scared them all till their very souls trembled in absolute fear. The look in Naruto's just told them. They royally just screwed the fuck up. You Konoha bastards might have won this day, but rest assured. I'll be back, and next time, he said as the ninjutsu and explosive noted kunai all struck where he was. I'll kill all of you. He yelled as all the attacks collided with each other. Boom. In a fiery blaze of destruction, the end of the cliff exploded in a red giant fireball of Kaiden jutsu and explosive kunais. The cliff totally destroyed. The Konoha nin all looked to see the once most hated enemy of Iwa, Kumo, and Konoha's body gone. His body must have been vaporized from such a combined attack. Orochimaru theorized as Jiraiya walked over to Tsunade with Kushina's unconscious form on the ground, with he himself having a grim look on his face. To think, even in his weakened state, that guy did all that damage to us to just protect this girl, he said, looking at Kushina's form with curiosity. I know, he fought like he was a man possessed. It was actually pretty scary when you think about if he were to ever have grown stronger. Tsunade said with a grim yet shaken look in her eyes. Jiraiya nodded. That was true. It was a good thing they had Naruto at his weakest, since he was not only still injured after fighting Iwa and Kumo, but also he took the hits aimed for Kushina made him weaker. He would admit it though, if they hadn't used those kind of tricks he had no doubt they would have all died, no questions asked. Still, it brought a shiver of fear up his spine when he saw that last look in Naruto's eyes and his parting words before the explosion. Looking at Kushina, he narrowed his eyes and brought out a bottle of ink and a brush, which Tsunade quickly knew what he was gonna do. It's time to finish the last part of the mission. Tsunade place her on her stomach. Once she did, Jiraiya did a few strokes quickly on the girl's neck, showing a strange seal. Next he did a few hand seals and spoke. Fuinjutsu. Memoriroku. Fuin. Fuinjutsu. Memory lock. Seal. With that the seal glowed a bright blue before disappearing along with the seal. With a nod of seeing the seal not visible, Jiraiya picked up Kushina's body and started walking back to Konoha, his teammates in tow along with their forces. Just that, Jiraiya never knew that the seal he placed on Kushina, he made a mistake on, which will cause him dearly in the future. Kyuubi within her container screamed in outrage as the seal placed upon her container did its work in locking up her memories of Naruto and her family. It was getting closer to her as well, and with her power sealed away she couldn't do much to stop it. I swear to Kami, Kushi-chan. Naru-kun will be back and will save us. I only hope it's soon. With the memory of Naruto vanished completely from Kyuubi as well, locked away by the seal Jiraiya placed upon Kushina. Konoha made a mistake though on that day, for kidnapping the very person Naruto loved the most has started a chain reaction that would change the world forever. Inside the ravine ground, on the ground of the deep ravine of Hi-no-Kuni, was a large crater with rubble of rock around the crater. Inside the crater though was the bloody form of Naruto. Only this time he was covered head to toe in glowing seals. His blonde hair was matted down with blood and his face was pale. His body started to glow rapidly with the seals in the color of a deep yellow with a tint of black. Once the first seal cracked, it started a chain reaction of the others following and, with a last pulse of chakra. Boom! An explosion of chakra along with yellow-blackish energy erupted in the ravine as the energy of the release was about to reach past the ravine and alert many. It stopped suddenly and quickly followed right back, converging right into Naruto's yellow glowing body. His whole form was seeable, but his appearance was unseen by any. Though that quickly changed when the yellow energy gradually started to fuse into his body. As it did so, it revealed a different Naruto. The once tan skin he had was now a porcelain that glowed brightly in the dark ravine. His height from his original 5 feet 5 was not a whopping 6 feet 4. His whole body was twice the size it was before and his muscles were 3 times the size they were before. His face was now a lot more angular and masculine. Some would think this man was in his early 20s. His hair was still golden blonde with a few black highlights within, with his hair being longer than it was before and much more tamed, but spikes still jutted out. That's when the slight twitch of movement from his hand signified Naruto was alive. When his eyes opened up slightly, it showed the color of something that would strike fear into many. His eyes were the color of a golden amber with a much more gold tint to it, and his pupils having a slit pupils of a predator. Silently looking over his body, the now giant of a teen spoke. Now, this isn't what I expected, he said before balling up his fist and slamming it against the ravine wall. Surprisingly, a feel of some kind of energy flowed through his attack, made the wall fall completely apart. Thus, made the newly changed Naruto blink in surprise before a grin came upon his face. Don't worry, Kushi-chan, soon. I'll come back for you, and this time, we'll be together and nothing shall separate us again. He yelled as an unnatural wind blew out from him, pulverizing the spiked and jagged walls of the great ravine. The ground itself trembled beneath his feet while the animals of the forest near the ravine all ran fearfully from the terrifying power coming from the ravine. Be warned, Konoha, your time is coming, said a flaming Naruto as yellow-blackish flames flamed from him.